Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto unlocks chakra chains and wave. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Uncommon Guru, and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, The First Promise. Kanahigaku no Sato, the village hidden in the leaves, was enjoying one of its quiet days. For some, this wouldn't do, as they took off and began training vigorously. Others found it quite enjoyable, though admittedly two were wishing that their third companion would stop yelling at them about how they needed to get off their lazy butts and train. For the gate guards, Izumo and Kotetsu, they fell more into the second category, especially considering they really had nothing better to do at the gate, and it was a slow day. They knew how to entertain themselves better than most other people in the village, and as such, were rather creative in their games. Usually this involved adding a few other rules that used some shinobi skill or another. Today's game was I Spy. I spy something gray. Kotetsu said. The pole? Izumo said, not looking up from some papers that he'd spread out in front of himself. Kotetsu gave him a flat stare. Yeah. How do you do that without looking? Izumo shrugged. I know how you think. Now my turn. I spy something. He glanced up, looking from side to side before looking back at Kotetsu with a smirk. Orange. Kotetsu blinked in confusion. Orange? Looking around wildly, he could see nothing in the nearby village that was orange, or remotely similar to that color. Turning back to Izumo, he narrowed his eyes. Are you spying something out of the 150-yard range again? 'Cause you know that's cheating. Izumo shook his head. Nope. In fact, it's actually getting closer. Closer? Realization dawned on him as he looked down the path leading away from Konoha. There, like a bright speck against the green foliage, were 4 people, and one of them was wearing bright orange. Uzumaki Naruto. Kotetsu said, a feeling of nostalgia coming over him as Naruto approached. Izumo shook his head. Nope. Kotetsu stared at the group for another moment before what his fellow guard said finally seemed to sink in. Whirling around on his fellow gate guard, he glared as he slowly asked, What do you mean, no? He's right there. Yes, but Naruto is not orange. I was spying his jumpsuit. Izumo said with a rather sage-like nod. There was a short pause as Kotetsu and Izumo stared each other down. Kotetsu eventually broke the stare down, scowling at his friend. You suck. Not wanting to talk to his cheating friend for the moment, he turned his attention to the 4 approaching shinobi. Just from their appearance, he knew that there was 1 jonin, and 3 genin, a sensei and his team. The jonin had gravity-defying gray hair, his village headband covering his left eye, and a jonin vest. The headband was a clear indicator of the person's identity, Sharingan no Hatake Kakashi. His charges were dressed in a far more eye-catching clothing. The first one to catch his eye was dressed in a short-sleeved blue shirt, white pants, and had hair that arched back with large bangs framing his face. He knew at a glance that this was Uchiha Sasuke, the last Uchiha of Konoha. Despite having been away from the village for nearly 4 months, there wasn't much that seemed to have changed about him. If he stared hard enough though, Kotetsu swore he saw a near-invisible smile on his face as he approached his home. The female of the team, Haruno Sakura, was the second most visible of the group. Unlike Sasuke and Kakashi, she wore a red dress with white trimmings, her bright pink hair standing out more so than the others due to its uncommonness. From what Kotetsu could tell, she was animatedly attempting to talk to Sasuke, without much success. The final, and by far most visible, member of the team was dressed in an orange jumpsuit, with bright blonde hair, and even brighter smile. The village's notorious prankster, and most unpredictable shinobi, Uzumaki Naruto. He looked the most ecstatic to be back and kept running towards the village, and then back to the team shouting something about ramen. It brought a smile to both Izumo's and Kotetsu's faces. Come on you guys, I can see the gates from here. Sweet glorious ramen, here I come. Naruto shouted as he ran forward. Ma Naruto, wait for us. Kakashi said in a half-hearted lazy way. Naruto ignored his sensei, instead speeding faster towards the gates. Sliding on the soles of his sandals, he turned on his heels and began bouncing on his toes as he watched his team meander the last couple of yards to catch up. They spent a moment at the guard post, affirming their identity and checking back into the village. Within moments they were headed into the village. Izumo sighed as he watched them leave. Well, that was a nice bit of excitement for the day, Kotetsu nodded. Then, a small grin crossed his face. I spy something orange. Kakashi's book. You're no fun. With our bright team, Kakashi was looking to the Hokage's tower with a far-off look in his eye. Their mission had turned into something akin to a disaster, and due to the nature of events that had taken place, he actually had to have a discussion with the Sandaime. Wanting to have the discussion in private, he made a motion to get his team's attention. You guys look really tired. Why don't you all head home? I'll handle the debriefing. All 3 genin turned to their sensei with a bewildered look in their eyes. Normally, for their usual deranked missions, they would enter the Hokage's tower together, and present their mission report in the same manner. It was meant to develop their abilities to report when they later became Chunin and Jonin. For Kakashi to do this was to break protocol. Of course, none of them were going to pass up an opportunity to go home early. Thanks Kakashi-sensei. Naruto yelled as he all but dragged his two teammates after him. Personally, he wasn't tired at all. He probably would have been able to keep going for another couple of hours of tree hopping before really feeling exhaustion overcome him. He was just in a hurry to find Iruka and tell him about how kick-ass he was on the mission. After going nearly 2 blocks, his teammates finally broke his grip on them. The second he released them, Sakura moved to past him to Sasuke's side. Sidling as close as she could get, Sakura put on the cutest looks she could as she spoke. Sasuke-kun, you want to go get something to eat, to celebrate our completed mission? We can leave Naruto Baka, since I know he annoys you. Sasuke gave her a slight glare, though there wasn't really any effort put into it. No, Sakura, I don't want to go get anything with you. Sakura sighed, already knowing that Sasuke would say that. He'd always said that when she'd asked him out, no matter how covertly she attempted to ask. And soon to follow. Sakura-chan, if you want, I'll go get lunch with you, was Naruto's dim-witted attempt to ask her out. This time though, Sakura was tired. Unlike Naruto and Sasuke, she didn't have the stamina to do all of the things they were capable of doing, like tree hopping for hours on end. Plus, she hadn't yet dealt with the stress of their C-ranked mission turned A-ranked in difficulty, not to mention the missing mean that they had stared down and barely survived encountering twice. Not only that, but they had spent the last couple of days straight traveling from Nami no Kuni, land of waves, to Hai no Kuni, land of fire, which meant that she hadn't been able to clean herself as thoroughly as she wanted, and she wanted nothing more than to relax in a tub for a few hours. After a date with Sasuke, of course. But no, she had to deal with getting rejected by her Sasuke-kun again, and Naruto's bumbling almost the moment she arrived home. Knowing that Naruto would try and push the matter did nothing more than make him a larger target for her recent anger. So, without a second thought or any preamble, she finally snapped. No, Naruto, I don't want to have lunch with you. Sakura shouted, feeling the stress of the entire journey pouring out of her onto Naruto. It felt good to shout at someone. She personally didn't see why others didn't do it as often. In fact, I want you to stop asking. I'm tired of you asking me out on dates. I'm tired of you provoking Sasuke-kun, and more importantly, I'm tired of you. So just stop it, okay? Due to their place in the village, their conversation had attracted the attention of a small group of civilians. Even Sasuke seemed to have taken an interest in the conversation, if only because he wanted to see how Naruto would react. Sakura usually either reprimanded Naruto verbally, or went straight to punching Naruto in the face. To see her reacting so harshly to something as stupid as asking her out seemed a little out of place, which meant that Naruto's reaction should be quite interesting to see. For his part, Naruto stood pretty firm, not budging as Sakura yelled at him. Internally though, he was panicking. Ah man, Sakura's gonna hit me. What did I do? Whoa, she's turning red. I better say something. I'm sorry, Sakura-chan, Naruto said, looking at his feet. He really hoped that Sakura didn't keep yelling at him. He really didn't know how to respond to her right now, and it unnerved him more than a little bit. Sakura shook her head, sighing lightly. I'll forgive you, Naruto. As soon as the words left her mouth, she got a devious idea. Just promise me that you won't ask me out on a date anymore and we'll be fine. Naruto's head snapped up, his eyes wide in shock. What? Sakura smirked, crossing her arms as she spoke with a more bossy tone. You heard me, Naruto. Promise me that you won't ask me out anymore, or I won't let this go. Naruto flinched as he heard this. Of all the things to ask him, why did it have to come to this? It wasn't that he wouldn't agree. He didn't want to be on bad terms with Sakura for anything, it was that it would tear him apart to make that promise. It was worse since he'd be saying them to his crush, Harino Sakura. It was no secret that he had a crush on her. He'd been trying to ask her out since the last year of the academy after all. It wasn't really like he expected it to go anywhere serious, like boyfriend-girlfriend or something like that. He just wanted to interact with someone who would actually respond to him. Granted, her version of response was punching him in the face after yelling at him, but it was interaction nonetheless. It was even worse since the only way he knew to interact with girls was dating. He knew that dating was supposed to be intimate, but from what he'd seen of guys and girls interacting together, dating seemed to be the only common trend to form friendship between guys and girls. With guys it was easier, train and beat the crap out of each other, and something will eventually pop up later that they could do. Guys seem to have more in common with each other than with girls. Giving Sakura one last desperate look, Naruto finally began to reply. Sakura-chan, promise me. Promise me that you won't ask me out again. Sakura said, this time obviously demanding. Naruto winced at her tone, knowing what it meant for him. She, and pretty much everyone else, knew how much promises meant to him, and that he would do everything he could to keep said promise. Plus he'd only heard her talk like that a few times before, but even he was not so thick-skulled to miss the threat of pain that would come if he didn't do as she asked. Not to say that he actually planned on keeping that promise completely. If the opportunity arose, he would ask her out in a heartbeat. He just had to figure out how to say it so it didn't sound like he was asking her out, finally giving in and resigning to his fate. He quietly muttered, I promise. Sakura gave his face a scrutinizing once-over, before nodding to herself. Good. I'm going to hold you to that promise, you got it? No more asking me out. Naruto nodded, feeling a knot form in his gut. As she said the word promise, he noticed a small tremor run down his spine. It was different from the chill of cold, or goosebumps he'd get whenever he was about to be caught after pulling a prank. His chest tightened, and his breath was momentarily caught in his throat. As the feeling finally began to fade away, Naruto realized that Sakura was walking away, chasing once again after Sasuke, who had left when he'd gotten bored of the conversation. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Somehow, he felt that he'd stumbled into something that was bound to be painful. Several days later, Naruto stared into the empty space where he figured Kakashi was bound to show up. It had become a game of his to guess where Kakashi would show up from. So far, he had yet to be right, but he was certain that Kakashi would show up from the side of the bridge with arches this time. It was amazing how consistent Kakashi was at being late, seeing as he was nearly 3 hours late again, and it was grinding on everyone's nerves. Well, Naruto's and Sakura's nerves. Naruto couldn't really tell if Sasuke was affected by his tardiness or not. He'd never seen Sasuke so much as twitch when it came to Kakashi's habits. In fact, only Naruto and Sakura seemed to react whenever Kakashi showed up. Funny that. He should be here any second now. Naruto thought with a smirk, rubbing his hands together. He had him this time. He couldn't be wrong every single time that Kakashi showed up, right? Yo! Naruto's smirk faded rapidly as it shifted to an expression of disbelief and amazement. No way! He came that way yesterday. How no? He's not doing that just to mess with me. That would be silly, right? Sakura was less distracted by her thoughts. You're late. Kakashi's eye shifted to its usual upturned U-shape, indicating a smile as he explained his tardiness. Sorry I'm late. I met the most intriguingly beautiful woman, and decided to stalk her, since she seemed too good to be true. Turns out, she was just your average ordinary kunoichi, though she did have some very unusual interests. Liar! Kakashi had to force back a pout. I wasn't done yet. I was going to tell them how I trapped her under a box after luring her with bait. The intoxicating power of Dango. Thinking of which, I should probably get back to her soon. Well, since you're here, I guess I can tell you all that the Sandaime gave us all the day off, and said to enjoy yourselves. See ya, Kakashi said quickly, disappearing in a puff of smoke to who knows where, before Sakura could yell at him about how he made them wait for 3 hours to tell them that. He knew that they'd be mad at him at their next meeting, but the look on their face though was well worth it. Plus, it wasn't like Sakura could actually do anything to him. Enko on the other hand is another story. Hopefully she won't try and kill me this time. Back with the genin, while Naruto and Sakura's minds tried to catch up with what Kakashi had said, Sasuke had already begun leaving. Noticing Sasuke's departure, Sakura called after him. Sasuke-kun, how about we work on our teamwork, just the two of us? Sasuke rolled his eyes, not even bothering to answer her question. Catching the hint, Sakura slumped despondently. Naruto had flinched at the way Sakura had worded her question, but brightened as he caught the change in her attitude immediately. Jogging next to her, he grinned widely in his well-known, wide, toothy smile. Hey Sakura-chan! Sakura flinched at his tone, knowing what he intended to ask. Not bothering to change her demeanor as his question definitely wouldn't make her feel any better, she gave Naruto a half-lidded glare. What do you want, Naruto? Naruto opened his mouth excitedly, thinking for a moment that he had a shot to go on a date with Sakura. Then, the strangest thing happened. Instead of saying anything, his throat closed up. Naruto made a kind of gagging noise, trying in vain to get his question out. There was a slight burning sensation in the back of his mouth the harder he tried. Noticing Sakura's confused look, he tried one last time. With no words coming out, he finally gave up. Shoving his hands into his pockets, he bit his lip before trying to say something else. Never mind, Sakura-chan. Sakura watched Naruto's face morph through a variety of emotions. First excitement, then confusion, then subdued, then back to confused. Brushing it off as Naruto being weird, she ignored him as she walked away. Naruto followed Sakura's departure with an unfocused look. His normally unfocused and scattered thoughts suddenly had something to think about. To him, it was an innocent question, but he'd been unable to ask it. He remembered the promise he'd made to Sakura a few days before, but it seemed ridiculous to think that was what had stopped him from asking her out on a date. He hadn't made any promises that he'd been able to break. Or did I? Naruto thought, grabbing his head as he became more and more frustrated. Shaking his head to clear his thoughts for the time being, he finally came to a decision. He'd head over to the academy, talk to Irika, and get some answers. Taking a step forward, he paused as his stomach growled loudly. Okay, Ichiraka, for some ramen. Then to Irika-sensei, he shouted, completely reversing direction as he made his way to his favorite food establishment. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the shinobi no kami, god of shinobi, stared down at his desk with a happy sigh. Leaning back into his chair, he pulled out a little orange book and slowly read through the literature that his student had written. The reason for this reprieve was quite simple. The daimyo had declared today a national holiday years ago, when he'd retired. Since he'd come back into service, it was a day where no one would dare bother him with such things as paperwork unless they had some kind of death wish. Taking a long drag on his pipe, he felt the tension of his job ebb away. For the first time in several months, his body was at ease with the world around him. His mind, on the other hand, was far from relaxed as it raced through thoughts of his village, recent missions, and Uzumaki Naruto. After the recent mission, he'd had a long discussion with Kakashi. Or rather, he'd listened as Kakashi had gone over how the mission could have potentially gone worse and how they had needed backup. It had actually taken nearly a half hour before he could get Kakashi to stop listing other, not relevant things that could have gone wrong. He eventually got to explain how he couldn't risk sending another genin team, the only team available being Team 8 at the time, especially due to the Hunternin's presence. While it was obviously that the Hunternin was just acting, they just couldn't risk the chance of that being true, especially since Team 8 had 3 clan heirs with techniques that other ninja would love to have. While Kirigakure no Sato, village hidden in the mist, may have had a recent bloodline purge, Kumogakure no Sato, village hidden in the clouds, would pay handsomely for the Byakugan, which would be a bad thing for all parties. That one mission could have started the Fourth Great Shinobi War. While this was more than enough to satisfy Kakashi for the time being, Kakashi's next subject was what was eating at him at the moment. He believed that Naruto was more than ready to hear about his family. His reasoning was sound, especially if he told Naruto that people like Zabuza would be hunting him if he accidentally said the wrong thing to the wrong person. All that was well and good, but he was unable to bring himself to tell him. The reasoning behind it was simple enough. He was nervous about how Naruto would react. He knew from personal experience that those who were related to the Hokages generally had a different take on life, and usually acted out more than others. Before Naruto had come around, his grandson Konohamaru would do whatever he felt like in an attempt to get people to respect him for him, including assassination attempts on himself. Tsunade, despite being the granddaughter of the Shodaime Hokage and one of the powerful legendary Sannin, had left the village and was gallivanting about gambling her life away. His son, though, would be a far better example of what he expected of Naruto. Sarutobi-sama had been a smart kid growing up. He'd graduated Rookie of the Year, he'd shown great progression as a genin, and his only real weakness was his wild streak that was a mile long. This led to the two of them butting heads on more than one occasion, and shortly after he'd become Chunin he'd left the village and went off to join the daimyo's personal guard, the 12 Guardians. For Naruto, he couldn't risk it. Naruto wasn't just a shinobi, he was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. If Naruto got into a disagreement with him and left the village, there was little he knew he could do to quell the madness that would come from the news. He had the power, but no one could control chaos of that magnitude on their own for long. Rubbing his temples with a heavy sigh, he shook his head. He knew he'd have to tell Naruto about his lineage eventually. Just not yet. After his first Chunin exams were over, he'd tell him regardless of whether or not he actually reached the rank. He just hoped that Naruto proved himself strong enough to survive the tests. Naruto jogged down the road towards his favorite eating establishment. His stomach was empty, he had the whole day to do whatever he wanted, and planned to enjoy himself as much as possible. However, there was just one problem with that. He had too much on his mind. If anyone who knew him heard that he had too much on his mind, they'd probably laugh at him. After all, he was the dead last of his class and obviously couldn't take a moment to think. That couldn't be further from the truth. Naruto did think. In fact, he actually thought a lot. The only problem was that his thoughts went by faster than he could catch them, and usually wound up being either bored or confused. Right now, he was definitely confused. He'd just recently left his team meeting and stumbled across something strange. He promised Sakura that he wouldn't ask her out, and then when he tried to get around it by saying it different, he couldn't say it. He'd never had anything like this happen to him before, and despite his current grin he'd been terrified. It was his greatest kept secret, his fear of the unknown. It was why he really didn't like ghosts. No one could explain how or why they were there, just that they were there. What had happened to him wasn't something he'd ever heard of, or heard anyone else talk about, which made it unknown. And it scared him. As such, he was headed to food first, and then to visit the one person he figured would be help him, Yumino Irika. He'd figured out who he planned on seeing as he made his way to Ichiraku, oddly coming to the conclusion to ask Irika due to the fact that he knew they both ate there, and he'd answered a few of his previous questions there. While he'd been a prankster during his time at the academy, Irika had done what he could to answer any questions he'd had. And since he'd done what he could to make it easy for him to understand, Naruto trusted him to be simple and honest. It helped that Irika was one of the few people that he'd labeled a precious person because he'd saved him when Mizuki had tried to kill him. Rounding the last corner, he spied Ichiraku and bolted the last bit as fast as he could. Skidding to a stop just outside of the restaurant's flaps, he pushed them aside with a flourish. One bowl of miso ramen. Naruto? What are you doing here? Naruto blinked in confusion as he looked at the other person sitting in front of him. Eh? Irika-sensei, what are you doing here? Irika grinned, waving a pair of chopsticks in greeting. We have the day off today, and I figured I'd see you here at some point. Really? Naruto asked, sliding into the seat next to him. I don't remember having any day off. Did I miss something? Irika chuckled. Probably. You somehow managed to skip today at the academy every year. What day? Naruto asked, tilting his head in a confused manner. It's the Sandaime's birthday. Also known as Paperwork Day. Irika gave him a sidelong look and noticed his confusion. You didn't know that? February 8th. Naruto's eyes widened and his jaw dropped as he took in this information. He had never once asked when his Gigi's birthday was, and had never thought to ask someone when it was. He was so far gone, he missed when Ayam placed his ramen in front of him. Naruto, are you okay? Iruka asked slowly, waving a hand in front Naruto's face. What? Naruto asked, blinking his eyes rapidly. In true Naruto fashion, the first thing his mind thought of was the steaming bowl in front of him. Awesome! Itadakimasu, Naruto. Iruka slowly rubbed the bridge of his nose. Naruto turned back to Iruka, noodles hanging slightly out of his mouth. Huh! Shaking his head in exasperation, Iruka chuckled. You haven't changed a bit, have you? Naruto grinned. Of course I have. I'm a genin now. I've been training really hard, and just got back from my first C-ranked mission. Iruka's grip on his chopsticks tightened at the mention of that. He'd heard the story from Naruto a few days before with him, and Iruka had immediately set out to find Kakashi and give him a piece of his mind. He'd been unable to find him, and when he told the Sandaime, he'd just been brushed off, seeing as Kakashi had done the right thing because endangering your team of genin was the right thing to do in that situation. A C-ranked mission? Ayam asked from the kitchen. Naruto grinned, jumping into a fully detailed description of his mission, complete with sound effects and unnecessary commentary. Iruka ignored him for the most part, focusing on his ramen in an attempt to finish his next bowl before Naruto finished his story. Ayam, and shortly after he'd begun Tuchi, seemed to hang off his every word. Iruka inwardly chuckled at Ayam's little gasps of surprise and excitement whenever Naruto had done something impressive, knowing how exaggerated Naruto could be. After all, no one could turn themselves into a windmill shuriken and have themselves thrown at a missing nin without them knowing, right? As Naruto began to tell about the walk to the village, he remembered what he'd planned on asking Iruka after he'd gotten something to eat. Hey, Iruka-sensei? Iruka said, drawn away from his ramen. Something happened today, and it's really been bugging me. Naruto rubbed his cheek nervously. Do you think you could help? Iruka looked Naruto over thoroughly. Naruto had only asked questions about something when it was something of particular interest, and those were usually very, very interesting conversations to try and explain to him. Having not seen him since the academy, he was a bit nervous as to what new subject Naruto would bring up. However, he was still a teacher at heart, and didn't have it in him to not try and help. Sure, Naruto. What's the matter? Naruto twisted around in his chair, trying to get a bit more comfortable before he began. Have you ever made a promise you didn't want to keep, but found yourself having to keep it when you want to break it? There was a small break of silence as Iruka thought over the question. The way Naruto worded the question made it sound like Naruto had discovered some secret that he was dying to tell someone, but had been expressly forbidden from talking about it. While it could have been on his mission, Iruka quickly decided it was likely something else. Although Naruto hadn't mentioned how he'd beaten the ice user Haku, he was more than capable of connecting the dots and figuring that the Kyuubi had been involved. Oh, so he wants to talk about the Kyuubi, but was told not to. That makes sense. Iruka thought, not realizing how far from the truth he could be. Sadly, he was unaware of Naruto's promise to Sakura. Well, Naruto, it could be that you're just becoming more mature, Iruka said, smiling kindly as he patted Naruto on the shoulder. Naruto scrunched up his face in confusion. What's mature? It means you're growing up. Sound to me like you've finally decided to take your shinobi life seriously. Naruto's confusion left instantly. Yeah, that sounds right. I've been working really hard to become Hokage. Promises are important to someone as awesomely powerful as the Hokage, right? Iruka nodded, glad that he'd gotten through to the blonde. Right, Naruto. Now go enjoy yourself. Naruto grinned impishly at that. Quickly placing down some money for his ramen, he got up and began to make his way towards his apartment. He'd missed out on every one of the Sandaime's birthdays, and he planned on making something big. Maybe another run at the Hokage monument with the words Happy Birthday GG would work. See you later. I've got 12 years to make up for. Iruka shivered as he felt his prankster senses tingle. Peeking his head out of the flaps, he shouted after Naruto. Promise me no pranks today, Naruto. The last thing the Sandaime needs right now is you getting out of hand. Naruto groaned, whirling around to face his former teacher. Don't worry, I promise. There was a shiver that ran down his spine and a pressure in between his eyes as he said those words. It was going to be a long day for Naruto. Chapter 2, Dawning Realizations. Iruka slowly made his way to the Hokage Tower, sighing as he did so. While he had the day off from academy duties, he part-timed at the Hokage Tower to earn a little extra pay. Most other people avoided the tower, knowing that it was a very bad idea to aggravate the Hokage. For Iruka, his need to feed his wallet outweighed that fear. After all, he was feeding Naruto part-time. Ascending the stairs, he knocked gently on the Hokage's door. Hokage-sama? There was a small bit of noise from the other side before he got the okay to enter. Poking his head in hesitantly, he was greeted with a small smile. Ah, Iruka, it's good to see you. Please come in. Iruka did so slowly, knowing that he needed to tread carefully. How are you today, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi shrugged. It's been quiet today. Peaceful for the most part. Iruka nodded, understanding what the Hokage meant quite clearly. Well then, I hope your day remains that way. Sarutobi nodded, taking a slow drag on his pipe. There wasn't any day better than today for him, and he was going to get all the enjoyment as he possibly could from it. Like take pleasure in others' misfortunes. So Iruka, I heard you have my grandson in your class now. Iruka's face scrunched up in exasperation as he remembered his dealings with the Hokage's grandson. Yes, I do, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi leaned forward in his seat, a small smile on his face. And how has he been? Taking a deep breath, Iruka slowly spoke. He's a good student, for the most part. Every now and then he pulls a prank. It's like having Naruto back in the classroom again. Sarutobi chuckled at that. Yes, I imagine it would feel like that. He has taken a certain shine to Naruto and his antics. He's often referred to Naruto as his boss and his rival for Hokage among other things. It's actually been rather humorous to hear him going off on how he plans on showing him just how powerful he's become. A small rosy hue crossed his face as a certain memory came to mind. He's also become quite proficient at using the Oiroku no Jutsu, centerfold technique. If the blush were any indication, Iruka remembered the technique only too well. I guess I should be glad he hasn't unleashed it at the academy yet. It would be really bad to spread that particular technique to our impressionable youth. Sarutobi tapped his chin thoughtfully. I'm not too sure that it hasn't already. Konohamaru has a pair of friends that he spends a lot of time with. It's quite possible that he's taught them as well. Iruka paled at this, unsure of just how bad it could be if those three unleashed said jutsu on his unsuspecting class. If the other girls didn't kill the boy, the clans would surely bring their wrath upon him, since the technique would look like it was spreading from the academy, more specifically from him. I hope he doesn't use it until after the academy. I thought I'd finally gotten the clan heads off my back when Naruto left the academy. Sarutobi nodded as a large smile crossed his face. It's always nice to hear that he's made such lasting connections with the clan heads. Being remembered by such important people will be a boon should he ever become strong enough to take over my position as Hokage. Iruka nodded slowly. That's one way of looking at it. Of course, he'll have to make other connections too. And get off his ramen-only diet. As he said that, Iruka remembered the conversation he'd had with Naruto. Rubbing his hands together, he chuckled nervously. Speaking of our favorite troublemaker, I wanted to talk to you about something. Sarutobi sighed, taking another long drag on his pipe. This was bound to be something he didn't want to deal with, but would like to have out of the way for later. Alright, let's hear it. Well, I think Naruto's having some difficulty with the secret he was told when he graduated, Iruka said slowly, not wanting to break the Sandame's law concerning said subject in front of the man himself. For his part, Sarutobi didn't outwardly react to the subject. Really? He seems to have kept quiet thus far about the subject. Of course, I suppose if he really has no one to talk to about it besides the two of us, the past few months in Nami no Kuni would have been stressful to him. Iruka nodded. I agree, Hokage-sama. However, I don't know what to do about it. He needs someone to talk to, but this is a serious matter that he can't just freely tell anyone. He grimaced as he thought of the pained look on Naruto's face when he'd asked the question. This secret has made him grow up so fast. Sarutobi sighed, understanding the underlying thoughts of the man. I'm sure he'll be fine. Noting the still stressed expression on Iruka's face, he gave him a disarming smile. If it means that much to you, I'll have Kakashi talk to him about it. After all, Kakashi has had experience with something similar. Iruka nodded, understanding that Kakashi would understand certain parts of it that other people wouldn't. Thank you, Hokage-sama. He glanced out the window, a small smirk sliding onto his face. I wonder what he'll get you for your birthday. A coughing sputter caught Iruka's attention and made him turn to a sudden red-faced Sarutobi. What cough? What did you say? Iruka blinked at the sight of the Hokage in such obvious distress, unsure of what to make of it. I was just wondering what Naruto was going to get you for your birthday. Noticing the red in his face turn pale rather rapidly, Iruka felt a shiver run down his spine. You've never told him it's your birthday today, have you? Sarutobi slowly shook his head from side to side. They'd seen what kind of gifts Naruto had given Iruka on his birthday, the Oiroku no Jutsu being one of those gifts at one point. Both men turned their eyes to the window, awaiting the pandemonium that was bound to come from Naruto's good-natured attempt at giving his Gigi a birthday present. If one were to describe Naruto, tactical would not be one of the words used. Mischievous, overly energetic, and an idiot would be a few, but not tactical. Most people didn't even want to believe that he knew the first thing about strategy, and the different branches that would eventually develop in combat. However, this was a perfect way to describe his pranks. He thought of almost everything, the materials that he had or could get, the shinobi that could potentially get in the way, his way out, and he even went so far as to take how long it took to get it done into account. He couldn't do this in the field, due to a certain lack of instructors who were capable of turning harmless pranks into hardened battle strategies, though he had shown that he could pull off an on-the-spot strategy during the mission to Nami no Kuni, which was why he was in a particularly peculiar position at the moment. You see, he had just recently heard that it was the Sandame's birthday. He knew that while he didn't have much, nearly everything he owned had come from the man, and even now he continued to help take care of him. As such, he wanted to make up for all the years he missed, and the best present he could think of was painting the Hokage's monument with big letters that would read Happy Birthday Hokage Gigi. The only problem? His brain was broken. After meeting Iruka, he'd rushed back to his apartment, locked the door, and pulled out some plans. He had so many ideas, all of which would be helped along if he used his Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. As soon as he began his plotting, he'd either forget what he was doing or found himself scratching his head at the suddenly cryptic plans he'd used to first paint the Hokage's monument, which was why he figured his brain was broken. After all, this hadn't happened before, and he was getting frustrated. Damn it, what's wrong with me? He shouted to no one in particular, as he took a step back from looking at his plans. Pacing back and forth in front of the table that he'd laid the paper on, he tried to wrap his mind around this mystery. He knew he was rusty at pranks due to his time being filled with missions and training. He wasn't just some academy student anymore, and he had to step up his training if he wanted to become Hokage. Heck, he had to step it up if he wanted to beat Sasuke. Ah! I remember now, I was going to go train. Naruto shouted, his mind drifting to the new thought. Turning to run back to his room to get more training-ready clothes, he noticed the paper on the table. Wait, damn it! He scowled at the paper. He'd somehow gotten sidetracked from trying to figure out why he couldn't plan his prank. That wouldn't do. This was a very important prank for a very important person. It wasn't like he could put it off for some other day and do it then. It would be unexpected, but rather besides the point. As Naruto thought along that line of thought, he found plans forming. Old plans, new plans, revised plans all formed in moments. Instead of rubbing his hands deviously as he normally would have, he just stared ahead into space as the hamster in his head began to run in its wheel. That would work, but I'd have to do it tomorrow. Naruto muttered, thinking of a few different pranks at the same time. Discarding them, he moved on to more immediate plans that he could work with. This continued for nearly 10 minutes before he finally had to give up. All of the good plans he could come up with took too long, and would have to be done either the next day, or the day after. Sitting back down in front of his paint the monument plans, he sighed. Why can't I pull this off today? What's wrong with me? Promise me no pranks today, Naruto. Naruto blinked at the memory of the promise. He'd almost forgotten about the promise, what with him trying to forget about said promise and get the Hokage a birthday present by pulling a great prank. It was just a promise, but for some reason, it felt different. Kind of like his promise to Sakura had felt, only less painful. Biting his lip, he slowly sat back down. This was not something that he ever remembered happening to him, especially since this was unlike any feeling he had ever experienced before. Not only that, but it had happened twice now. Remembering what he'd been told by Iruka at Ichiraku, he rolled the thought around in his head. So this is maturity? Naruto muttered. It made sense to him. Of course, he didn't really understand what Iruka had meant when he'd said it was a part of growing up either. It was probably one of those things that they taught at the academy, and that he missed because he skipped that day. Silently he muttered that he would try and pay more attention to the lessons people taught him. He bet that all this basic stuff that he should have learned early on was going to keep haunting him until the day he died. Of course, this also meant that for the time being, he had no gift to give to the Hokage. Groaning in mental agony, he finally gave up on the giant prank. The constant mind blanking was making him frustrated, and since it was a day off, he wanted to go out and train. But that wasn't going to happen until he got this monkey off his back. Monkey, he said with a chuckle at the terrible joke. Pushing the thought aside for later, he thought of other things he could possibly get the Hokage for his birthday. Since the prank was out, at least for today, there wasn't a lot that he knew that other people got each other for their birthdays. This would be the first birthday present that he'd be getting anyone. The only present that he'd ever gotten from someone other than the Hokage. Naruto looked over to his dresser, the old gift now on his mind. Opening the top drawer, he stared down at a pair of green goggles that rested in its own little place in the drawer. Slowly, almost in a reverent manner, he took the goggles from their place. The goggles had come in an unmarked package on his birthday 2 years ago. He'd actually been about to throw it out, thinking someone had just dropped some junk in front of his door by accident. The only thing that had stopped him was the little tag that was on it that said it was to him. When he'd thanked the Hokage the next day, and found out it wasn't from him, he'd found a lot more value to them. There was someone out there who'd given them to him, and that gave it all the more value to him. I've got it, Naruto said, the tension slipping away to be replaced by excitement. Now, I just have to find something awesome to give to Hokage Gigi. Rushing to the door, he stumbled briefly as he realized he still had the goggles in his hand. Gripping them lightly, he quickly went back to place them back in his dresser. I'll figure out who gave me these, he said, his fingers brushing against the tag that had moved from underneath the goggles when he moved it. It had been a while since he'd seen it, yet he still vividly remembered the flowing handwriting on the card. Returning the goggle to their resting place, he spun back to the door and headed out. He had a present to find. Kakashi was having a rather amusing day. After meeting with his team and messing with their heads, he'd headed off to meet with the woman he'd asked to meet him at a nearby bar earlier. It was slow going for their relationship seeing as nothing had come of it yet, but that didn't bother him. He'd learned to discipline himself in Umbu, and patience was something that he'd come to pride himself on. This trait was particularly important to develop for hunter nin or assassins, which were two of the main subdivisions he ran during his time as Umbu captain. Most people thought that this particular discipline was thanks mostly to the little orange book that he read publicly on a daily basis. This was actually not true. After all, a book in his hand was no substitute for the real deal, and he didn't want to be known as one of those closet pervs who actually did that. No, he had better reasons for reading it mostly. However, said book was not out at that moment. He had been asked to lunch by two other recent jonin, Kurenai and Asuma. According to what he'd heard, they met on occasion to have lunch and swap notes on how they were training their students, and they tried to figure out how to make their methods more efficient. Kakashi just wanted to hear for himself what these methods were. The best part of this was that he was only a half-hour late. Their reaction to his arrival was almost more amusing than his team's reaction to him being late. Almost. You're early? Asuma asked, his eye wide and somewhat panicked as his eyes darted about. From his expression, he obviously was expecting the world to end or something of the like. Kakashi smiled at them. I fell off the road of life and somehow wound up in the neighborhood and figured I'd see what it felt like to be early. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It feels the same really. I might have to mix it up every now and then just for kicks. Kurenai, for the most part, had a far more calm expression. Thank you for coming, Kakashi-san. Please, have a seat. Shrugging nonchalantly, he sat in the seat next to Asuma. So, what were you going to talk about today? Asuma and Kurenai gave each other a look, as though trying to convey some secret message he was not meant to know about. He sighed as he realized that he really didn't know whatever they knew, which meant that this was appearing eerily similar to an infiltration mission. Both of the other jonin seemed to have recognized this as well, and were doing their best to think of things to talk about which wouldn't tell him anything important. Like he didn't already know, he just wanted to see what they came up with. Well, we've really been working on their teamwork, Asuma said casually. So that's how they're going to do it, Kakashi thought. His smile fell slightly as he thought of his own team. He'd done more than a few teamwork training exercises, but overall they still had a lot that they could work on. Especially in their individual skills. They've got a lot of raw talent for kids their age, but they still need refining. Kurenai said, taking over where Asuma had left off. Their clans are very helpful for their individual techniques, but if they don't work well with each other then those will be pointless in the field. Kakashi winced inwardly at this. Yes, I imagine that they would. An uncomfortable silence came between the three jonin. It was broken shortly after as Asuma's and Kurenai's food came. So Kakashi, how are your kids coming? Pretty good, Kakashi said, slowly rolling a glass of water the waitress had been kind enough to leave for him. Overall, their skills need work, but their teamwork is more difficult to train. Asuma raised an eyebrow at this statement. Oh really? And why's that? Kakashi chuckled. Because Naruto's on the team. Both jonin looked confused at that, which just made Kakashi chuckle more. After seeing just how Naruto's spontaneous energy was capable of bringing up on the fly, pre-planned formations felt somewhat redundant. Naruto, for all the IQ of an idiot, was more capable of figuring out how to get out of sticky situations than some Anbu recruits he trained with. If he'd used the same situation with one of the recruits, against an enemy who was vastly stronger than they were, they'd have listened to what he'd said and run away. He'd actually given the situation to his successor, Tenzu, and had him run it once while he watched. They'd come up with several plans, most of which involved high-level jutsu that became too overcomplicated and wound up blowing up in their faces when it didn't work. Not one of them thought to simply use the basic henge to do what Naruto did. There would have been some differences between the attempts, but that was to be expected. All in all, it was more proof of Naruto's latent potential. Asuma shrugged, knowing they weren't going to get any more out of Kakashi. Well, I guess that's your problem then. Asuma rolled his cigarette in his mouth, a rather smug grin on his face. Besides, if our teams were to go up against one another, the Ino Shikacho combo would be more than enough to take on any sort of formations you could come up with beforehand. Kurenai gave Asuma a flat look. The Ino Shikacho is a rather well known in the shinobi world. What is it that make it so great? Asuma chuckled. The teamwork of the three clans is known, yes, but with the different techniques they have and teach, the combos are capable of changing to accommodate different situations. With the Naro brains, Akimichi brawn, and Yamanaka mind techniques, no team could take them on and win if they were unprepared. Kakashi gave them a firm look, a mischievous twinkle hidden within it. Is that so? Tell me, what are your plans for the upcoming Chunin exams? Ino was having a really off day. She had the day off from training and there weren't any missions that her team had to do, so she was stuck working in her family's flower shop to pass the time. She'd thought that when she'd become a shinobi she'd be able to be out of doing demeaning chores. In fact, she still had to do chores when she was doing most missions. It was bad enough doing them at home, but having to do them for someone else was just demeaning. If it weren't for the fact that civilians actually could do most of their work on their own, she was certain there would be a lot more work for her to do. She'd actually asked her dad about it when she'd become frustrated by a babysitting job. According to him, civilians actually did do most of their own stuff, they just had an overflow of jobs that they couldn't get done with the time they had. Their work kept the village afloat during war as they were able to supply the shinobi with weapons or other items when their normal routes may have been cut off. It made her more grateful for the things the civilians did. It didn't make her complain less. She was just more grateful. Her only solace in the job was that she actually liked working in the flower shop. It was something to bring out the social butterfly in her, and was one of those things that she could do. Because she was good at it, it brought a certain peace of mind to her. After all, while Sakura was on Sasuke's team, Ino had the practical skill set to back up her claim on Sasuke. Sakura was all brain. Sasuke wasn't looking for someone like that, she sighed, staring into space as she looked around the shop. There were usually more people who came into the shop, but today was rather slow, which meant she had a lot more free time than she really knew what to do with, which drove her crazy. Just as she was about to snap, the bell attached to the door rang as someone entered. Turning with a grin, she began to say the store's greeting before she realized who it was. "Welcome to the Yamanaka Flower, Naruto." Naruto glanced around nervously, his head snapping up as he heard Ino say his name. "Ino? What are you doing here?" "My family owns this place," Ino said, her chipper mood increasing. "So how can I help you?" Naruto scratched the back of his head nervously. I was looking to get Hokage Gigi a gift since it's his birthday, but I didn't know what to get him." "And you decided to get him flowers?" Ino asked skeptically. It didn't sound like the sort of gift Naruto would get someone, or that the Sandaime would want for a gift. Naruto looked down, shuffling his feet. "Well, I've seen other people flowers for each other, and they usually look really happy when they get flowers. So I figured Hokage Gigi would like it too." Ino giggled at that. "Naruto, guys usually get flowers for girls. You know, to impress them?" Naruto turned his gaze to some of the flowers. "Really? But flowers are nice. Why wouldn't Hokage Gigi like flowers?" "Because they're supposed to be girly," Ino said offhandedly. She knew her father enjoyed the shop just as much as she did, but for the fact that it gave him something to do when he wasn't out drinking with Shikaku and Choza, that made him an exception. Naruto, on the other hand, had never been told this before. "Really? I always thought that gardening and flower arranging was supposed to be some secret skill girls learned to give them an edge since they didn't have taijutsu sparring until 3rd year. I actually wanted to try sneaking into the class to see what the big deal was." He grinned impishly. "Actually, I did try once. It didn't go so well." "Really?" Ino said, her inner gossip quickly surfacing and demanding details. "What happened?" "Well, I tried to use a henge to turn into a girl, but when one of the other girls poked me I turned back into a guy," Naruto said, scratching his cheek at the memory. "The teacher was so mad, she gave me detention and had me clean the erasers. I got back at her good though. She learned to not mess with the great Uzumaki Naruto." Ino frowned at this story. She had never missed a day of the academy, constantly vigilant in making sure that Sakura didn't get one over her in getting close to Sasuke. She did, however, remember the time when her teacher came in, panting and with lime green paint in her hair. "So that's why she had paint in her hair?" Naruto nodded. "Yup. It took me a bit, but I eventually got it set it up just right and nailed her on her way to the academy. It was pretty funny, right, Ino?" "Ino?" Ino didn't answer the question right away, an interesting thought having taken root. Naruto was on Sasuke's and Sakura's team. Sakura was her rival for Sasuke's affection, the way Sasuke was Naruto's unwilling rival for Sakura's affection. Sakura had gotten onto Sasuke's team due to lucky pickings, which meant that Ino would normally have little to no chance of getting her shot at Sasuke. But if she had some inside help, it could be possible. "Naruto, could you help me with something?" Ino asked as innocently as she could. Sure. What's up?" Naruto asked, not feigning innocence in the slightest. Ino grinned, as she slid behind the counter. "Well, I needed some help getting some info on Sasuke-kun." Naruto blinked in confusion. "Huh? What do you want to know about him?" Ino shrugged. "Anything and everything you could get for me. If you want, I'll help you get that date with Sakura you've always wanted." Normally, this would have made Naruto ecstatic, and jump at the opportunity. With the strange happenings of him being unable to break his promise to her though, he had some things to think over before throwing himself at Sakura again. Thanks Ino, but I'll pass on that." Ino's eye widened in shock. "Has Naruto given up on forehead?" "No way, he's been starstruck since the academy. This is big. How am I supposed to get him to tell me what he knows about Sasuke-kun now?" Naruto glanced around the room again, oblivious to Ino's thoughts. "I could use some help getting Hokage Gigi a gift though," he said, snapping Ino out of her thoughts. Noticing her bewildered look, he explained. "I haven't gotten a present for anyone's birthday before, and I wanted to make it up to Hokage Gigi, since he's done so much for me." Ino nodded, finding that this was probably an even better deal than something she couldn't really promise. "Okay, well, how about we'll get the gift today, and we'll meet the day after tomorrow." "Why not tomorrow? I don't have all that much to do, and the missions don't take all that long anymore." Naruto asked. "Because I have team practice most of the day tomorrow," Ino said, rolling her eyes at what she'd said. "Well, more like we practice for a bit, then Asuma-sensei takes Shikamaru aside to play shogi for the rest of the time while Choji sits around and eats chips. I swear, I'm the only who takes our training seriously." Okay?" Naruto had no idea what to say to that, and made the smart choice of not leaping into dangerous waters. Rocking back on his heels, he returned to looking around the shop. "So, can we get started? Hokage Gigi is not getting any younger now." Ino stared at Naruto, unable to believe the audacity of his statement, while at the same time trying not to laugh at how true it was. She almost felt bad about taking advantage of Naruto like this, but it wasn't like Naruto wasn't getting anything out of it, and if it got her one step closer to Sasuke, she was all for it. "Well then, we don't want that to happen. Let's get to work, Ino said, nodding vigorously. Today was a great day for her. Out of the blue walked a gold mine that would get her that much closer to her Sasuke-kun. It was like a dream come true, and she planned on making her dream a reality. Chapter 3, Words to Regret. 3 figures darted through the foliage, stealthily making their way towards their target. The success of this mission was imperative. Failure was not an option, especially after all they'd gone through to get to this point. Distance to target? Their leader's gravelly voice came over the radio. Despite their abilities, they weren't certain of whether or not they were actually going to be able to pull this off. It was a disaster waiting to happen, if their opponent's abilities were as unpredictable as they'd heard. 30 meters. Do we have the green light? The voice of their female companion responded. Wait. The team leader responded. Why are we waiting? We have him, we should take him now. One of the other members said. We need to hold back. The final member of their squad said, trying to be the voice of reason. You've heard what happened to the last squad, we can't just. No, I'm going now. The target turned, obviously hearing his shout. He exploded from the brush, uncaring of what his teammates thought. There had been too much pain that had come from everything that had happened, and now he would end it. If nothing else, he would at the very least stop the piercing look in those uncaring, gray-ringed eyes. Before he got halfway to the man, a heavy weight slammed into his back. His teammates could hear a crack as the two slammed onto the ground, obviously from his spine rather than from the ground. His teammates winced, taking note of the new arrival. Unlike the first, who had spiky orange hair, this newcomer was bald with an unusually thick neck and odd body shape from what they could tell from beneath his thick cloak. Their team leader had once had a close encounter with this particular man before, and knew just how dangerous his abilities. Get out of here! This has become too. He managed to get out before it was cut off into a gurgling noise as a third figure, a woman with blue hair and an origami flower in her hair, drew a kunai across his throat. The final 2 members of the team jumped towards each other, getting back to keep from being snuck up on. Unfortunately, they weren't expecting the sudden wave of chakra to force them into the trees. As they were flying through the air, they noticed the first man holding his hand in their direction, as though to push them away. The female of the group got off relatively unharmed, while the final male member slammed into the tree and was knocked unconscious. Within moments, Hanzo's team of hunterines sent to kill the ever-elusive Pain was taken out. Once again, the shinobi of Amigekyo no Sato, village hidden in the rain, were proven ineffective against the might of the self-proclaimed god. The large, bald man moved quickly to recover the 2 unconscious Amigekyo shinobi. It wouldn't do for them to die before they'd completed the test runs. It would be a show of the true power he had as a god, and the unconventional final gift of the man who had shown him the truth of how he would bring peace to the world. The blue-haired woman moved to the still-conscious Amigekyo female. What's your name, Chika? Akiko Chika. She responded slowly, trying not to aggravate the injuries she'd received. Chika. The woman repeated slowly. It was normally a bad idea to know the name of someone who you were about to take prisoner due to building attachments. However, she might as well know what to put on the gravestone that would never be made for the poor girl. Chika said nothing as she was bound and lifted into the woman's arms. It was only as they began to move that she finally built up the courage to speak. What are you planning to do with me? I'm not anyone important, and there's nothing that you'll get out of me that you won't be able to get from one of my teammates. We know. The blue-haired woman replied, maneuvering through the trees behind her orange-haired and bald companions. Then why? What are you going to do with me? Chika asked. If they knew that they wouldn't get anything useful out of her, then what could they possibly want from her? To her surprise, the blue-haired woman actually answered her question. Albeit, very vaguely, you are going to be the beginning of the Sennin no Tain, seed of war. Naruto wrung his hands as he stared down at his team from atop a wall. Since his little conversation with Ino, he'd become amazingly more aware of the things that Sasuke did, or had done. He'd noticed plenty of stuff about Sasuke before, but now he was also taking note of the weird stuff that seemed pointless to know. Like how after Gato was killed, Tsunami had made a special dish with tomatoes, and Sasuke had asked for a couple extra. When Sasuke had performed his missions, he held back from overexerting himself. He'd even noticed that after missions Sasuke would head off towards the abandoned Uchiha district, and wouldn't be seen again until the next day. It was mind-numbing. He owed Ino though, and every bit of information he got would help. After all, unlike the ever-conservative Sasuke, he found that if something was worth doing it was worth overdoing. And he knew how to overdo stuff only to much enthusiasm. Despite all of this newfound knowledge, he was currently a nervous wreck. The reason that he was in this current state was due to the fact that the past 2 days had turned into a perpetual hell for him. If anyone had asked him 2 days before, he'd have said the same thing and that it was Sasuke's fault. Now though, it was different. Or rather, his perception was different. Come on Sasuke-kun, it's just lunch, Sakura said flirtatiously. He sighed, hearing Sakura attempt to get Sasuke to go out with her. He tried asking Sakura out again after he'd given the Hokage his gift to see if it was just nerves about breaking him promise. After his throat had closed up and he'd watched her leave again, he'd realized that he wasn't going to be breaking his promise anytime soon. He thought he had it all figured out when he figured out he couldn't pull pranks. But the promise to Sakura was different, mainly in that he didn't really mean it when he said it, but was still held to his word. It was something to think on, though he really didn't want to think about something this complicated at all. "No, Sakura," Sasuke said, not bothering to look back at her as he left to do whatever he did. Naruto watched him leave, noticing that once Sakura had turned away dejectedly, Sasuke actually looked back at her. His look was not what he expected. It had pity, regret, and resolve. Naruto scratched the back of his head in confusion. Why would Sasuke look at Sakura like that? Things just kept getting stranger the more he tried to pay attention to his surroundings. Checking the time, he figured he'd better head over to Ino's to get their Sasuke talk over with. Hopping down from the wall and landing in a crouch, he paused as he heard a startled yelp in front of him. Looking up quickly, he noticed Sakura looking rather flustered expression. It turned sour quick as she huffed and turned away from Naruto. "What do you want, Naruto?" Naruto blinked, unsure of how to answer. If he hadn't made the promise, he would have tried to cheer her up by asking her out. Now though, nothing. "Just wanted you to know I was leaving." Standing up and shoving his hands into his pockets, he turned and walked away from Sakura. It hurt him more than he thought it would, but he couldn't think of anything else to say or do. If he stayed, he would end up trying to ask her out, come off looking like an idiot, and have to watch her walk away a third time. Even he knew better than to let himself be hurt for a third time. Plus, he had to meet with Ino in a little while, and he didn't want to be late. Sakura watched him walk away, unsure of what to think of Naruto's behavior. Sure, she had wanted Naruto to leave her alone, but now that he was, it felt less of a victory and more of a defeat. Like Naruto's advances had filled some hole in her that she hadn't realized was there until Naruto had stopped filling it. After staring after Naruto, she turned and walked in the opposite direction. She had a lot to think about. Naruto's light pace quickly picked up into a jog as he made his way to Ino's family's flower shop. Ino had told him during their gift shopping extravaganza/birthday crash course that he should meet her there, and that they would go somewhere else that was more private to ensure that other people wouldn't easily overhear them. He just nodded and followed after her, not bothering to ask any of the important questions that he was asking himself now. Crap, was I supposed to get her when I was done with my mission, or at a specific time? Was I supposed to wear something more stealth-like to where we were going? Where are we going? Why didn't I ask her these things before? What did she mean by private, and why doesn't that make me feel better? These thoughts and more whirled through his head until before he knew it, he was standing outside the flower shop. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed the handle of the door to enter. As he did so, it was thrown violently open into his face as Ino walked out. "Bye, Mom. I'm heading out for the day," Ino shouted over her shoulder as she left the shop. Barely taking a step outside, she noticed Naruto on his back with a line down the middle of his face and blood coming out of his nose. "Oh good, you're here. Now I don't have to go looking for you. Why are you on the ground?" "We've got work to do." Ignoring his obvious injuries, she picked him up and began to drag him away. Naruto barely managed to stumble before falling slightly behind Ino as she led the way. Not knowing where she was taking him, and having no idea where in the village they were at, he discreetly began to take in his surroundings. There were open vendor stands on either side of them, people motioning for people in the street to come buy their product. Naruto had difficulty not leaving Ino's side to go check out some of the better-smelling vendors they passed, though her grip didn't give him much choice in the matter. However, there was something else that he noticed as they went through this particular portion of the village. In most other parts, people would see him and quickly turn their heads, not wanting to look at the demon. Here though, people saw him and did something strange. They smiled. Some even waved at him. After a few people did this, he hesitantly waved back. The young woman who had first waved seemed to brighten further as she then turned to talk to the man beside her. "This is a nice part of town," Naruto muttered, returning another man's wave as they passed by. Ino shrugged. "I guess they are. We are shinobi though, so I guess that's to be expected. After all, they help us, we protect them. We're like heroes or something." Due to her being ahead of Naruto, she didn't see him frown at that. While he was more than happy to be considered a hero by people, he wanted to feel like he'd earned it. In Nami no Kuni, he knew he was their hero. After all, Inari had only told him a couple dozen times. But at least by then, he'd fought and earned the right to be called a hero. These people though, considered him a hero just for being a shinobi. They smiled at him, even though they knew who he was. They were nice and waved, and seemed genuinely happier that he'd acknowledged their waves. Naruto figured that he'd somehow stumbled into his own personal heaven. Either that, or he was having the best dream ever. After walking a little more down the market area, Ino led him down another path that held quite a bit more variety to their selection. There were tool shops, clothing stores, general furniture stores, stores for stuff he never heard of before, stores for old stuff. Naruto couldn't take it all in, though he tried his hardest as his eyes darted about. To top it all off, his treatment hadn't changed in the slightest. People still smiled and waved, and brightened when he happily waved back. He felt like younger than he'd ever felt before, and hoped this never stopped. Unfortunately, it eventually did come to a stop, as Ino pointed to a restaurant a short ways away. "Alright, we're here." The restaurant was small, but nice. It was maybe 2 stories tall, with windows for both floors letting steam out as the food inside was being cooked. Despite its modest appearance, it appeared as though there were quite a few people inside, trying to beat the lunchtime rush. To top it all off, there was a large sign that read a kimchi restaurant that hung over the entrance. Naruto had heard of places like this, that cooked the food in front of you as you ate. He'd heard the food was excellent, and that once you'd finished your food, you were given complete privacy to converse with your companions or… Naruto's eyes widened, and his jaw tightened as the thought hit him. "Ino, we're eating here?" he asked hoarsely. Ino raised her eyebrow, noticing his sudden change in behavior. Yeah? Choji's family owns the chain of restaurants in the village. Since we're close, we can grab a private booth that will keep people away while we talk. Naruto tried to swallow, feeling his mouth dry. His eyes never left the restaurant. "And you're expecting me to pay, right?" Ino shrugged. "Well, I guess. If you want to pay for both of our meals, I'm not going to stop you." Her eyes narrowed and her voice quickly became sharp. "Don't think you're mooching off of me, though. If I'm paying for my own food, I'm not paying for yours too." Naruto nodded. "Okay. Never mind." Now thoroughly confused, Ino jabbed him in his side. "What? It's nothing, just a stupid thought," Naruto said, hoping to avoid embarrassment. Unfortunately, Ino could see that only too clearly. "Oh no you don't, tell me what you're thinking right now." Naruto bit his lip, muttering under his breath. Barely containing her urge to smack him over the head, she slowly hissed at him. "What was that? I didn't quite hear you. Is this a date?" Naruto said, finally able to get his voice to project loud enough to be heard. Those words froze Ino as she stared at Naruto. Naruto's face quickly turned slightly red, and he averted his gaze to the ground. He knew it. He'd been doing just fine, meet with Ino, walk through an amazing section of the village, was being invited to a very classy restaurant that he probably wouldn't have known was here if Ino hadn't shown it to him, and now he'd screwed it up. He was so, I guess it is, stupid? Naruto's jaw promptly hit the ground as he took his eyes off the ground. She continued, looking thoughtful and blissfully unaware of Naruto's bewilderment. "I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. You picked me up, we had a nice walk, you offered to pay for my food," Ino said, rambling off how date-like their meeting was. "And you're okay with that?" Naruto said, tensing slightly to prepare for getting hit. Instead of hitting him, Ino smirked. "Yeah, I guess I am. I mean, it would have been so much better to have had my first date with Sasuke-kun, but if it means I'll know more about him than any other girl, I'm more than willing to go on a date with you." She shrugged, her smirk shifting into a sly look. "Besides, you promised that you would help me get Sasuke-kun." Naruto blinked in confusion. "What?" "No, I didn't," Ino pouted, knowing how to push Naruto's buttons. "So now you're lying to me? I thought you were better than that." "But I didn't say that," Naruto protested, flustered by the sudden change in Ino's attitude. "So now you're calling me a liar? I thought you kept your promises. I thought you were better than that." Ino turned on her heels, overdramatically marching away from the restaurant. "If that's how you're going to be, I don't need to be here." Naruto panicked, figuring that he'd somehow done something wrong. "Did I say that? It sounds like something I'd say, but don't remember," he thought as he rushed in front of Ino. "Wait, please don't go." Ino let her bangs shadow her eyes, hiding her smile. Being a Yamanaka, she knew how people's minds worked better than pretty much anyone else, as well as how to use that to manipulate people to get what she wanted, and she wanted to make absolutely sure that Naruto wouldn't tell any other girl what he was going to tell her. "Then why won't you admit you promised?" Ino said softly. Feeling the need to drag out a bit more sympathy from her fellow blonde, she bit her lip and looked away from Naruto. "You promised that you'd help me when I helped you get the Sandame's gift, so why won't you admit it?" It was times like these when Naruto wished people would have helped him understand the confusing nature of women, or better yet, for girls to stop changing what they were thinking so often. Naruto was so dragged into Ino's story, he was becoming more unsure of if he'd made the promise or not. "Ino, I don't remember promising that," Naruto said hesitantly. "Then promise it again." "It won't hurt to say it again," Ino said, eyes widening slightly to look more innocent and slightly pleading. She could tell that he was so close to getting him to promise, she could practically taste it. "I don't know." Naruto bit his lip, remembering how the two last promises he'd made had turned out. Granted, the no-prank promise wasn't that bad seeing as he could prank any time he wanted now, the no-date promise was eating at him. Maybe it was just his imagination, and it was some part of him trying to get over Sakura. Or ghosts that were messing with his head while he slept. He couldn't really rule anything out at this point. Promising Ino something like this wouldn't be too bad, right? "Well?" Ino asked. If this didn't work, she planned on waiting for him to get out of sight and use one of her family's jutsus on him. She wasn't good at getting information like her father was, but it was more than worth it. She would beat Sakura to Sasuke. "Fine, I promise," Naruto muttered. Ino leaned forward, grinning despite herself. "What was that?" "I didn't quite hear you," Naruto scowled, just short of shouting as he repeated the promise. "I promise I'll help you get Sasuke." The familiar sensation of a tremor running down his spine and burning in his gut hit him a second later. As he felt it, his whole body went rigid. He had no idea how his promises worked, but after the 2 times he'd felt it, he'd quickly associated it with him making a promise. And the only time he'd felt it during the promises was when he'd made said promise. So why had he felt it when he promised Ino now if he promised her before? Naruto barely noticed as Ino pulled him forward. If there wasn't any confirmation of something strange going on with him before, this completely solidified it. And now he was stuck helping Ino get the impossible to get Sasuke. Things couldn't have possibly gotten any worse. Orochimaru was not happy. Normally, when Orochimaru was not happy, people died. Some died quick, while others died slowly to some acidic poison or whatnot. Today, however, was slightly different in that the cause of his distress was twofold. The first issue was the upcoming Chunin exams. He'd been working out all the details in advance. The soldiers, the ways in and out, even down to which of the Oto genin to send into front for the exams. He planned on placing the Ten no Juin, Curse Seal of Heaven, on Uchiha Sasuke during the second exam when they were sent through the Forest of Death. He still planned on doing that, however, the speech he thought to say to make him come after him for power against his brother had to be changed. There were certain variables that he'd underestimated, and while it was actually a good thing that he did, it meant that he'd have to tweak his plan. He really didn't like that. The second thing that added to his distress was the now smoldering letter he just read. It had held the information that had informed him to change his plans, but held something else as well. Something that if he didn't immediately set up preparations for, he and the rest of the shinobi world would be destroyed. Kabuto. Orochimaru said, his voice not betraying his distress in the slightest. It wouldn't do to have his subordinate becoming suspicious of him. Kabuto entered a moment later, his glasses catching the light in a way that hid his eyes from view. Yes, Orochimaru-sama? I need my seal notes, he said smoothly. Kabuto tilted his head slightly, the light giving way to show the confused look in his eyes. Your curse seal notes? Forgive me for asking, but I thought you were done with all the research you could get from the seals? Orochimaru nodded, deciding to indulge his subordinate for the moment. I did. However, a thought has occurred to me, and I've developed a new theory I'd like to test. His eyes narrowed and he let his killing intent wash over Kabuto. It was not a request. Not showing his nervousness, Kabuto backed out into the hall. Heaving a small sigh of relief, he went to get the folder on the cursed seals. He knew better than to ask unimportant questions like that. However, his curiosity had every right to be piqued. After all, Orochimaru had never reopened a closed subject that he'd learned enough of. This meant that there was something that Orochimaru had thought of, something that he might have missed and made a connection from one of his other projects. I kind of missed working on the cursed seals. Kabuto pushed his glasses up from the bridge of his nose. This should be quite enlightening. Orochimaru closed his eyes as he felt Kabuto's chakra signature get further away. He knew that Kabuto would be somewhat suspicious about Orochimaru's current actions, but would eventually disregard it. After all, it was something the both of them had found vastly enjoyable to study, and had proved itself a source of quick power for those willing to throw away their sanity, or their humanity. What he was planning to use it for now, though, was far more complicated. If the information he had read was true, then his previous course was no longer as needed as he'd previously presumed. However, this also meant that all of the information he'd gone through such lengths to obtain could quite easily be rendered useless. That would not do, especially for a genius like himself. He was going to need an army, that much he'd already figured. He had a whole village full of common fodder shinobi which he could throw away at his leisure, and few soldiers that had actual merit in their fighting abilities. This helped keep them from getting any ideas of simply grouping together and attacking him as a whole to throw him off balance and potentially kill him. He was no fool. He needed their loyalty more than anything else. Kimimaro was a perfect example of loyalty, and of one who had been given power beyond that of his average shinobi. If he had half of his shinobi like him, then what he was planning would be quite pointless. However, he couldn't put this into effect just yet. Especially not with the invasion so close. They would discover too much if his soldiers were strong enough to push back their general shinobi and push their elite shinobi into compromising positions. When he'd left, he had done everything to make sure that he only left enough information for them to get a basic grasp of what he could potentially do. To give them another piece of his puzzle would cause them to intervene, which would continually set him back. He didn't like setbacks. His eyes opened slowly as Kabuto re-entered his chambers. Thank you, Kabuto. He picked up the folder, leafing through the pages. Kabuto eyed the folder, curiosity slowly overcoming his survival instincts. Where will we begin, Orochimaru-sama? Orochimaru looked over the folder at his subordinate. He mulled over the pros and cons of telling Kabuto, who would more than likely want to know what different applications there were to the cursed seals more than he did. It was in his nature, and he would take full advantage of it. With a sly smirk, he finally responded. We've already found how to mimic the enzymes Jugo naturally creates. Now we're going to figure out how to make the cursed seals become even more versatile. Word of Honor. Chapter 4. Interpreting Conversation. Hinata peeked around the post she'd been hiding behind, watching as Naruto and Ino walked into the restaurant. She'd noticed the two of them walking together shortly after Naruto had been hit in the face outside of the flower shop. She had initially thought that Naruto had gone to Ino's to pick up some stuff for the potted plant he had in his apartment. Not that she'd ever been in his apartment to know that, no. She didn't need to be inside to see inside his apartment. Blushing at the thought as she'd had a few accidents on different occasions, she shook her head to clear it of those particular thoughts. She had much more important things to think about. Like the recent chakra spike Naruto had let off. She'd seen it by honest, complete accident. Being too far away to hear what Naruto and Ino were saying, she'd activated her Byakugan to read their lips. It was one of the few things she excelled at in using her Byakugan. She figured that if she caught their conversation, it would explain why Naruto was with Ino. He had no previous interest in Ino beforehand, and she just didn't buy that Ino was into Naruto. Besides, you promised that you would help me get Sasuke-kun, Ino said. This immediately set Hinata's nerves at ease. It's just Ino wanting to get Sasuke-san, she thought with a sigh. What? No, I didn't, Naruto said, making Hinata lose her nerves again. Hinata tapped her fingers together, wondering what that meant as once again she had absolutely no idea what was going on. Listening further into the conversation, confusion soon became the least of her worries. She had to stop herself from shouting as she quickly came to the realization that Ino was leading Naruto on in an attempt to trick him into making a promise that he obviously didn't know he hadn't made. This became even harder to do when Naruto, in obvious distress, asked her not to go. Whether Ino knew it or not, she was hurting Naruto, and it was hurting her to see him like that. That was about where things had gotten weird. She'd seen Ino smirk when he'd said that, and knew something bad was going to happen. Making him make a promise like that was underhanded, and if she'd had the confidence she would have gone out and stopped him from being tricked like that. Unfortunately, she wasn't, and what happened next would haunt her waking moments. As the promise left his mouth, her eyes focused in on a change in his chakra. It built up so quick that if she'd had her Byakugan deactivated, from what she could see, it was just pure chakra that enveloped Naruto's head and then quickly shot through the rest of his body. Naruto's reaction to the spike was also something that made her eye widen. His entire body tightened, realization crossing his face. Obviously he knew that something had happened, although considering the way he followed after Ino, it was likely that he didn't know what had happened. Now Hinata was stalking, retrieving intelligence on, Naruto for a whole other new reason. She knew that Naruto wasn't prone to random chakra spikes from the time she'd watched him, which meant that the spike had to come from somewhere. Or someone. And seeing as Ino was the only other person with chakra in the area, Hinata was certain that she had done something. It didn't help Ino any that her family's techniques specialized around mind-related techniques. Hinata focused her eyes through the wall, watching them as they went through the restaurant. She was not going to let Ino trick Naruto again without knowing exactly what was going on. While she may have been shy, even she knew how to stand up once in a while. That she was doing it from a distance, and through a wall meant nothing at all. In her defense, it was a step in the right direction. Naruto leaned back, trying to see all of the man in front of him. He had heard of people like this. Large, intimidating, and worked in bars to keep the riff-raff out. His large, bulky frame seemed quite out of place, seeing all of the other, smaller workers attending to the customers. At least, if you didn't count the overly flowery apron he was wearing. Naruto didn't really notice, as he wasn't used to seeing people who were so broad. In an Akimichi sense, this wouldn't be difficult to believe. This man, though, had no markings that indicated he was an Akimichi, and rather than a broad stomach, he was broad-shouldered, and skinny waist. Comically so. His short, dark hair was covered in a tight fishnet hairnet, signifying he worked in the kitchen. He had a white vest, and dark brown hakama-styled pants. The entire getup seemed mismatched, and out of place, at least it did to Naruto. Ino seemed to brighten upon seeing him. "Welcome to our establishment, how may I help you?" he asked in a bright, and very chipper manner. He paused as he looked them over, spending an extra second on Naruto, before throwing his arms into the air. "Ino-chan. It's been too long." "Hello, Yasuhiro-san," Ino replied. "How have things been since I was last here?" Yasuhiro chuckled. "Ho ho ho, business is booming. Sometimes I have to wonder if you Yamanaka are spreading good gossip about this place to make sure we stay in business." Ino gestured to herself, looking innocent. "Me? Spread rumors of how business here is beyond exceptional." "Yasuhiro-san, you flatter yourself." Yasuhiro laughed rather loudly, getting a glare from some of the nearby customers. "Too true." Switching to a more business-like attitude, he motioned them forward. "We have a private booth set up upstairs for you, just like you asked. Just make sure you don't do anything uncouth." Naruto blinked at the word uncouth, wondering what it meant and why it seemed to be aimed at him. Ino understood, and quickly swatted Yasuhiro's arm. "We're just going to have a little talk. Naruto here promised he'd help me get some information on something, and wanted to buy me lunch while we talked. Isn't that right, Naruto?" Naruto's head nodded mechanically. He found it difficult to swallow as his eyes looked over some of the customers and employees walking about. While Ino's back was turned, several people seemed to give him a once-over, like they were trying to remember who he was. A few people gave his a glare out of the corner of their eyes, causing Naruto to shiver. "Kami, his luck couldn't get any worse today, could it?" "Naruto, can I talk to you for a second?" Yasuhiro said, placing his extremely large hand on Naruto's shoulder, nearly knocking Naruto to his knees. Ino looked between Yasuhiro and Naruto, realization of some sort crossing her face. "I'll head upstairs and order us something to drink. Don't be too rough on Naruto while I'm gone." Naruto grimaced. "Please don't leave me alone with him." Ino ignored him, waving to the other employees as she walked past them on her way out. Hi everyone. Naruto watched her walk away, several of the employees fiddling with knives and different other cooking appliances that made Naruto nervous. As soon as Ino had gone enough upstairs to be out of earshot, all eyes focused on Naruto. Naruto swallowed nervously, wondering if he was going to get out of this alive. One of the cooks leaned over the counter, his knife hanging loosely from his hand. What are your intentions with Ino-san? Naruto tilted his head to the side, forgetting about the knife as he thought over the question. What do you mean? We're just here to talk. Really? That's all? Yasuhiro said, his hand still on Naruto's shoulder. Seeing Naruto nod, he released him and gave him a light shove towards the stairs. Best not keep her waiting then. Be on your best behavior. One of the waiters said, giving him a half-hearted glare. If you don't, we'll know. She'll be easy to buy for since she always seems to be on one of those damn diets, so I'd recommend the tonkatsu asterisk for yourself. The cabbage topping is quite excellent if I do say so myself. The first cook said with a chuckle as he spun the knife in his hand, going back to the food he had to prepare. I'm confused. Naruto muttered. 1 second, they seemed to be ready to skewer him, and the next they were giving him advice. We all know Ino personally, and want to see the best for her. Yasuhiro said, seeming to read Naruto's thoughts. Think of us as one big, overprotective family. Naruto nodded, immediately able to picture that from his own desire to have something similar. Heading to the stairs, he glanced back once to see several of the other waiters giving him a thumbs up. Grinning despite himself, he quickly walked up the stairs. Seeing Ino in the corner of the room brought back the reality of what was going on back to him. He had agreed to tell Ino what she wanted to know about Sasuke, and was then tricked into promising to help her chase Sasuke. Thanks to his inability to break his promises, he knew that he was going to be stuck until she got Sasuke. He was eternally screwed. Sliding into the booth on the opposite side of her, he took a small breath to steady himself. All he had to do was survive this, then avoid Ino as much as possible so that she wouldn't get the chance to figure out that he couldn't break his promise. He silently asked Kami to have mercy on him. He had no idea what he was in for. So, where should we start? Ino asked, trying to seem conversational. Naruto looked at his menu, noticing the prices, and weighed them against his wallet. Gamachan. I don't know. What did you want to get to eat? Ino shrugged. I'll just get a bowl of rice. And then? Naruto asked innocently. Just the rice. Really? For Naruto, that was strange. When Iruka took him out, he took advantage of his hospitality as much as possible. After all, he usually wasn't paying for the food, and he needed the energy for later. Wouldn't it be good to? Ino leveled a dirty look on him. Just the rice. Catching the hint, Naruto shut his mouth. Hiding behind his menu, he looked at the tonkatsu and figured how much it cost versus how much he had on him. After taking a moment to slowly do the math in his head, he figured he had more than enough to spend on it. Especially if Ino was only getting rice, and he paid for her meal. When their waiter arrived, they gave him their orders. Naruto noticed that as he ordered the tonkatsu with cabbage, the waiter gave him an approving nod, which made him brighten. Ino, on the other hand, got a rather disappointed look that went completely missed as Ino was already staring across the table at him. The waiter took their menus, and walked away hastily. Naruto briefly wondered if he could do a replacement with him. He did not want to be interrogated while he ate, good food or not. Not a moment after he'd left, Ino jumped right back into their previous conversation. Alright, so what exactly do you know about Sasuke? Naruto, caught flat-footed as he'd still been thinking of escape, took a moment to think up an answer to that. Not a lot. He leaves before we can do any kind of teamwork activity that will reveal anything about what he does. Ino sighed, shaking her head. She'd known that Naruto would be a very, very bad person to interrogate on matters like this, but she had to make the most of it before someone else thought to. Okay, how about we start small? What does he like? Training, I guess. Oh, and tomatoes. Naruto said quickly. Ino brightened at this. That was definitely information that she hadn't heard before. Really? That's good to know. What about dislikes? Naruto's face scrunched up, trying to think of something that Sasuke didn't like specifically. A lot of things, Ino sighed. I see. What about his tastes in girls? Has he tried to make any advances on forehead? Who? Ino blinked, realizing her mistake. Sakura. Has he tried hitting on Sakura? Oh, nope. Naruto shook his head. Sakura's tried, but Sasuke doesn't. Naruto trailed off, remembering the strange look Sasuke had given Sakura as he'd left. Ino leaned forward worriedly, having never seen Naruto with a look of thoughtfulness before. What? Sasuke doesn't what? Naruto shook his head. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You knew a second ago. No, that was what I thought. I don't know what Sasuke thinks. Naruto said, nodding to himself. Oh, come on. Ino hissed. This is to help me get closer to Sasuke-kun. Don't hold back anything. Naruto felt his gut clench and it took everything he had to stop himself from doubling over. Not wanting to be in pain for the rest of the meal, he thought faster than he'd ever thought before. Putting it together that the pain was coming from his promise, he thought of something that would sate Ino's interest. Within seconds he had something. Sasuke doesn't really like long hair. There was a blissful silence, Naruto sighing in relief as his guts stopped hurting, and Ino struck dumb by Naruto's declaration. Slowly dragging herself from her stunned state, she spoke slowly. How do you know? Naruto chewed on his lip. He knew that Ino would not be happy with what he was going to tell her, and that there was no way around telling her without him being in pain. Sighing in resignation, he answered slowly. Because I made it up. Made what up? Ino asked. She never felt so confused, and Naruto's vague answers were making it sound like he knew more than he was telling. I was the one who started the rumor that Sasuke liked girls with long hair. Ino's world collapsed in that moment. She was a smart girl, second only to Sakura in terms of smartness. However, this was foreign to her. That Naruto had started a rumor that had caused all of the girls, excluding Hinata, attending the academy to grow out their hair in an attempt to impress him seemed outrageous. She was so wrapped up in her thoughts, she missed the waiter's return with their dishes. Naruto did not. Itadakimasu, he shouted, digging in with no lack of gusto. Naruto nearly cried as the taste seemed to embrace his mouth. Oh man, this is so good. Ramen is still better, but man, I'd eat here another time, anytime. Ino blinked, looking down at her abysmal excuse for a meal. She didn't bother sighing, knowing that if she ate too much, she would lose the figure she'd worked so hard to get. Besides that, she'd eaten lunch with her teammates, which meant she'd gotten more than full enough on the barbecue Choji enjoyed so much. Biting her lip, Ino pressed for answers to her previous question. How do you make the rumor that Sasuke liked long hair? I mean, it's you. Who did you talk to that would spread the story? Naruto paused in his voracious eating, a small bit of cabbage sticking to his face. Picking it off and tossing it into his mouth, he recounted the experience that had eventually shaped many of the academy girls' lives. Flashback. Naruto had just gotten done playing with some of the other boys his age, watching them go as their parents quickly herded them away. He felt empty without anyone around, and found himself sitting in the sandbox. While he didn't have the tools to make a sandcastle or anything like that, he was doing his best to make a sand recreation of a mountain. It helped pass the time, and seemed to help numb the pain left from the loss of the other boy's departure. What are you doing? A small, timid voice from behind him asked. Naruto jumped, crushing his sand mountain underfoot as he turned to see the person behind him. His eyes widened in confusion at this new person, before quickly relaxing. It was a young girl, with unusual pink hair, a red and white dress, and a red ribbon that held her hair back. From what he knew of girls, they were usually less likely to hit him than guys were. If only he knew. I'm building a. Naruto looked at his now inverted mountain, groaning in exasperation. It was supposed to be the Hokage mountain with my face on it. Oh? The girl said, looking at ground sheepishly. She hadn't meant to startle him, she'd just been curious. My name is Sakura. Naruto smiled widely. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. Sakura gave a small smile, looking at the remains of his mountain. Would you like some help? Naruto nodded vigorously. Yeah, sure. His smile seemed to grow brighter. Thanks. The two of them played for another hour or so before they had a crude likeness of Naruto's face imprinted into the dirt mountain. They played a bit more on the adjoining playground before Sakura became tired and had to sit down and catch her breath. Naruto hung upside down nearby, still playing while he waited for Sakura to come play again. Sakura watched Naruto keep playing, his stamina amazing her all the while. As she watched, she got the feeling she'd met him somewhere before. Or at least seen him. Hey Naruto-san? Do you go to the academy? Naruto stopped swinging, still handing from the bars. Eh? Academy? The Shinobi Academy. Sakura replied. Naruto brightened. Oh yeah. That place is awesome. We're learning how to be real shinobi like Hokage Gigi. Hokage Gigi? Sakura said, not sure she heard him right. After all, her parents had taught her to respect people like the Hokage, saying he was a very powerful person. Yet here was a kid who was unafraid of calling the elderly man his grandfather. Her budding mind put it to the side, another big question coming to mind. So you know the other kids in class? Naruto nodded, more coherent than he was used to as he was experiencing a new level of thought processing due to the amount of blood now in his head. Yeah, I know some of the guys. He rubbed his chin in thought. There's Kiba, and Shikamaru, and Sasuke. You know Sasuke? Sakura asked, her mind racing with the possibilities. She had recently seen him at the academy, and was quickly smitten. There was so much that she didn't know, it worried her. After all, one couldn't just go find out more about a person in a book. Naruto scowled at the name. He didn't like Sasuke, not one bit. To him, Sasuke was cool and got all the girls' attention, and was a show-off. Just because the teachers liked him, he was special. Well, Naruto was special too. He was just special in that no one helped him, and he was still able to keep pace with everyone. Unknowing of Naruto's thoughts, Sakura prodded for more information. Do you know what Sasuke likes? Naruto shook his head. No, we don't talk too much, Sakura pouted. Not even a little? Now I'll never know what he likes in girls. Normally, Naruto wouldn't have thought of this, or thought of it so quickly. However, being upside down and having more blood in your head than you can remember does help your thought process. Oh. I heard him say something once. Sakura brightened. Really? What did he say? He said guys like girls with long hair cause they're really pretty, that's what he said? Naruto lied. He didn't know what Sasuke liked, but he did know what he liked. Sakura nodded. Long hair. Sakura pushed herself to her feet, suddenly running off. Bye. Naruto blinked olishly, watching her go. Bye Sakura-chan. Watching her go, he wondered if she actually listened to what he'd said. Later, Sakura told Ino and their friends that Sasuke liked girls with long hair. Their friends were even less tight-lipped about the subject, and were quickly telling others what she'd been told. Within the next year, the hair length at the academy grew out, and somehow poor Sasuke was none the wiser. Flashback end. Ino listened to the story intently, unable to comprehend the full depth of what had just been said. Of all the girls in the academy, she and Sakura had been the most devoted to Sasuke. If he wanted something, they did everything they could to impress him. Hair, smarts, and dresses. Ino had been certain that she'd been losing to Sakura. And all this time, she and Sakura had devotedly grown out their hair in an attempt to impress Sasuke. Ino frowned at that thought. Wait, why did you tell Sakura that Sasuke likes long hair? I didn't. I said guys like girls with long hair. Sakura just told people that Sasuke liked it. Naruto said, shrugging as he tried to eat some of his food. But why? Naruto sighed exasperatedly. Because I thought all guys liked girls with long hair. I didn't know other guys had preferences back then. Ino nodded. Okay, that makes sense. That doesn't explain. She cut herself off as her mind went into overdrive. Naruto had thought that all guys liked girls with long hair. Why? What would make him think that all guys thought that way? It didn't take long to come to a reasonable conclusion. Naruto liked girls with long hair, and Sakura had gotten every girl in the academy to grow their hair long by accidentally creating that rumor. That thought made her freeze. Slowly, an impish grin crossed her face. So that's why you like forehead? Naruto nodded, trying to shove some more food into his mouth before Ino asked him any more questions. By this time, he didn't know what Ino was thinking, and he didn't care. He didn't want to miss out on the meal and have it go cold because he was talking the entire time. That would be rude to the cooks. A plan formed in Ino's head, taking in everything that Naruto said and using it to her current advantage. Don't tell Sakura what you told me. Naruto rolled his eyes. If I did that, she'd pound me into the ground. She's grown out her hair for Sasuke for something I said. She probably didn't remember that you said it. She just heard what Sasuke liked and went on. Ino said dismissively. Rounding on Naruto, she jabbed a finger at him. You're going to keep your mouth shut about it. Naruto nodded, already knowing that he couldn't say anything about it to Sakura. Okay, and you need to distract Sakura from Sasuke when she tries to ask him out. He may not like her now, but if she keeps it up she might actually get close to him, Ino said, thinking over how close Sakura had gotten to Sasuke since they'd been on a team. Hey, why don't you ask Sakura? No! Naruto shouted, eyes widening in fear. He'd already promised Sakura that he wouldn't ask her out. After the pain in his gut from when Ino had wanted to know everything about Sasuke that he knew, he didn't want to find out what would happen if two promises overlapped like Ino was about to do. Ino was surprised at his reaction. She'd figured that Naruto would be only too willing to ask Sakura out, especially since he had a track record for asking her out. Okay, geez, Ino muttered. It was only a suggestion. To you? Naruto thought, not wanting to think about what would have happened if Ino had finished what she'd been about to say. Alright then, Ino said, leaning on her elbows. What do you know about Sasuke-kun's training schedule? The rest of the meal was spent with Ino asking for specifics on the times of their missions and training exercises to get between Sasuke and Sakura. She told Naruto that she planned on coming to him for his help on getting some other things, seeing as he had a guy's opinion, and she was going to need that soon. Naruto wanted to yell that he wasn't her servant but couldn't say anything. His mouth latched shut once she'd mentioned that it was to help her look good for Sasuke. Instead, he shook in silent rage, his mouth betraying him by agreeing that he'd be there to help. He'd been unable to finish his meal after that, asking the waiter for a box the next time he came around so that the food wouldn't go to waste. Ino hadn't seemed to notice his distress, only looking rather despondent about not being able to talk more. After paying for the bill and walking Ino home, Naruto began his trek home. He was now under Ino's thumb so long as she told him that what she wanted him to do would help her get Sasuke. Having only been manipulated like that with Mizuki, he found a budding resentment for Ino. He'd just been trying to be nice after she'd helped him find a gift for the Sandaime, and then she turned around and made him make a promise that he hadn't made. Sure, she didn't know that Naruto couldn't break his promises, but the point remained that she had tricked him. In a sense, it was a betrayal. The only real differences between hers and Mizuki's were their gender, what they wanted Naruto to help steal. And Mizuki knew the secret. He used to hurt Naruto while Ino was doing so blindly. Scowling, he shoved his hands into his pockets. The day had been good at certain points, the nice civilians, seeing the loyalty of the employees at the restaurant, and the food. However, the trick Ino had pulled on him had put a black mark on the day that seemed to blot out most of the good. It was amazing what that one thing could do to his day. Not only that, but it was Naruto's first date, and it had completely sucked. He'd done everything right as far as he knew, and it was still a flop. He knew it wasn't his fault. He'd watched a lot of other people's dates, how girls reacted to what the guys did or said, and made sure not to make the same mistakes. Ino just wasn't the sort of girl he wanted to go out with a second time. Wait, Naruto mulled over that thought. Ino and Sakura had been best friends in the academy, and were more alike than anyone he knew. Slowly, he thought of how the date might have been if Sakura had been the one in Ino's shoes. After several moments' thought, he realized that he couldn't find much of a difference in how the dates would go besides him getting punched when he told the story. Arriving at his apartment, he quickly unlocked the door and stepped in. Draping his jacket onto the back of one of his chairs, he walked into his bedroom and sat down on the bed. For the first time in his life, Naruto was going to look for deep, thought-out reasons why he liked Sakura. It would be a long, sleepless night for Naruto that would only bring more questions than answers. If anyone had walked past one of the benches on the far side of the Akimichi restaurant, they would have come across a very interesting sight. Hyuga Hinata, clan heiress and one of the newest rookies of Konohagakure no Sado, had a bright smile on her face. She was known quite well for being introverted and shy, but now looked happier than she ever had before. She gently ran her fingers through her hair, sighing at the strange new knowledge she had gotten from Naruto and Ino's conversation. While she was grateful that Ino had gotten Naruto's team meeting and mission information, she didn't care about that. She already knew that stuff from previous experiences. No, what she was pleased with was some of the new insight into Naruto that she'd never known. Naruto liked girls with long hair. He hadn't outright said it, but he implied it both during his story and afterwards. And to think, all of this time Hinata had kept her hair short as her own way of rebelling against the Uchiha fangirls who grew out their hair. It was strange to other Hyugas who traditionally grew out their hair, but none of them questioned it. It was a sacrifice in a way, as Hinata loved having her hair long. At one point, before she'd heard the rumor of Sasuke liking long hair, she'd grown it out slightly so that it reached her shoulders, and had enough length that she could style her hair more than simply letting it lay as it was. After hearing the rumor, she'd only left her bangs long as a reminder of her commitment. Now though, it was different. It wouldn't matter if people thought she was an Uchiha fangirl, or rejoining her family's traditional ways. She was doing it for herself and Naruto. And maybe, just maybe, that would help get Naruto's attention. Sighing contently, she went over some of the other information in her head. Due to the spike from earlier, she'd kept a careful eye on Naruto's chakra coils when she wasn't reading his lips. At several moments during their conversation, his chakra glowed brighter from every tenketsu, chakra pressure point. Normally, she couldn't see the points as she had learned to focus her eyes in a different way. However, Naruto was apparently different, as his tenketsu glowed enough to distinguish them without having to focus on them during those moments. Then they'd die out, and she was left wondering what was going on with Naruto. Chewing lightly on her lip, she slowly formed a plan. She knew nothing about how tenketsu responded to certain stimuli, or even how to see them clearly without them showing themselves like Naruto's had. So all she had to do was learn how to see them as though they were showing themselves. Then, once she found the ability to talk to him, she would confront him and see if he knew. If he didn't, then they'd be able to throw theories around and get closer. If he didn't know, then she would know something that possibly only he and she would know. It was a perfect plan. Now all she needed was someone who could teach her to see tenketsu better, and the backbone to talk to Naruto. This was going to take a while. Chapter 5, Keep Your Change. Things had been going smoothly for the past couple of weeks. Their teamwork had steadily grown, the few missions they'd undertaken had been completed without the usual fanfare, and the yelling portion of their dynamic had died down drastically. All in all, they were working like a well-oiled machine, which is why Kakashi knew something was up. They hadn't worked this well before, during, or directly after their mission to Nami no Kuni, their first contact with Sabuza being the only exception. Now, by some unknown phenomenon, it was suddenly being pulled together? He didn't think so. Nothing is that easy, even if it did give him more time for other things. Peeking over his book, he watched his students as they painted a fence for their customer. Naruto hadn't really changed, his painting skills a sure testament to that, as they were all over the fence, as he tried to paint as quickly as possible. Paint flew everywhere on the fence, somehow remaining on the fence despite the wild strokes. This was the normal Naruto. Sasuke and Sakura were more collected in their painting. Well, Sasuke was. Sakura painted, yes, but then she'd look at Sasuke, giggle, and then try and move closer to him as she painted. Sasuke had already anticipated what she was doing though, and moved further down whenever she tried to get close. If she hadn't been soiling the name of Kunoichi everywhere, it would have almost been funny. Kakashi looked back to his book. He remembered the good old days during the war, when Kunoichi had to take their job seriously or else things would go to hell before they knew it. The standards were so much higher, though the reason behind it was the training methods were admirably more strict. Good times. He snickered at the thought, turning it into a giggle before his students could hear it. None of them responded, meaning they hadn't caught his near slip-up. What a shame, I really wanted to mess with them a little. He thought, a quote from the book in his mind, just waiting to be used on his unsuspecting students. Now if only they paid more attention. With a heavy sigh, he reluctantly put his book away. They were getting close to being done, and he needed to rein them in before they started on someone else's fences. That had happened the last time they'd done this particular mission, due to Naruto's overeager attitude, and had earned them an off-duty assignment of removing said paint from the fences. Dealing with an emo, a fangirl, and a hyperactive blonde was something he'd rather not have to do for longer than the mission required. That's when it happened. It was so sudden, even Kakashi was startled into silence shortly thereafter. Naruto bumped into Sasuke, a very normal occurrence, seeing as even with the small space left, he was all over the fence. However, when he bumped into Sasuke, instead of yelling at him to get out of his way or shout some obscenity, he'd apologized. Apologized. Now he knew something was wrong with Naruto. His teammates noticed too, and appeared to be just as interested as he was. Well, Sasuke was. It's about time you started respecting Sasuke-kun, Sakura said, a triumphant look on her face. In her mind, any victory for Sasuke, big or small, was just as much a victory for her as well. Naruto raised any eyebrow at Sakura. What are you talking about? I bumped into him, and apologized. What's the big deal? Sasuke gave him a flat stare. Well, normally you'd yell at me for being in your space, even if you just moved into my area. What gives? Maybe I just got tired of yelling? I mean, after a while, it gets uncomfortable, you know? Naruto said, shrugging as though it were common knowledge. It was, though Sakura might have been the exception to that. Kakashi held back a grin as he watched the strange banter. Books were all well and good, but when comedy was involved, he watched his team, and this was always funny to watch, and never got old. Naruto, why won't you just admit that you're jealous of Sasuke-kun? Sakura said, huffing as though Naruto had done something wrong. Naruto shook his head, chuckling under his breath. Jealous? Of what? Mindless fangirls who constantly chase after me? I'd rather be stuck teaching at the academy than have to deal with that, Naruto said, shuddering at the thought. Academy over fangirls, any day of the week. Silence. Then, who are you and what have you done with Naruto? Sasuke asked, his Sharingan out and spinning rapidly, as though hoping to see past whatever genjutsu Naruto had placed them under. Kakashi chuckled. He'd already tried to dispel the genjutsu when Naruto first apologized. This was only too real, and getting better by the moment. Naruto scowled. Hey, just cause I don't apologize for every little thing doesn't mean you can just accuse me of not being me team. Sasuke stared while Sakura fumed as Naruto returned to his normal insulting ways. Slowly, Sasuke cut the chakra to his eyes and shook his head. Yeah, you're Naruto alright. You're the only person I know who insults me like that. Sakura felt rather out of place, looking between the accepting Sasuke and the still fuming Naruto. Deciding to add her 2 yen, she asked what was on everyone's mind. Wait, when did you become polite? Eh? Naruto asked, not expecting the question. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, he shrugged. A couple of weeks ago? I'm still being taught some of this stuff. Naruto flinched, realizing his mistake a moment too late. Sure enough, Sakura picked up on what he said. Being taught? Well, who's teaching you? Scrunching up his face in exasperation, Naruto growled. After Ino had told him why she was teaching him to have manners, and instructed him on what to say when asked about them, he'd been directing their attention elsewhere. The words came out smoothly, but made his throat feel like it was on fire. Ino's been helping me become more of a gentleman so that I'll be more socially acceptable. The recited portion over, he muttered under his breath, whatever the hell that means. Ino? Sakura asked, stars in the corners of her eyes. If Ino was too busy helping Naruto, or better yet dating him, then that meant that Sakura was closer to her Sasuke-kun than ever before. True love prevails. Shirano! Inner Sakura shouted, waving a banner with the word victory written on it. Unfortunately, Sasuke was actually interested in this particular subject. Wait, you mean to say that Ino's second-ranked Kunoichi in the academy has managed to teach you, the dead last, manners? Seeing Naruto nod, Sasuke smirked. Well, what do you know, there are miracles in the world. The impossible happened, Naruto is actually being polite. Kakashi grinned. This is almost better than my book. It's got less of the really good parts, but the plot and drama is so spontaneous. I should bring popcorn to the team meetings from now on. Sakura's entire attitude changed in an instant, from starstruck to thunderstruck. Sasuke was impressed by Ino's success? Oh no, Ino's winning! Inner Sakura shouted, a shadow of Ino appearing and dropping an anvil on her inner's head. Naruto winced, knowing better than his teammates did how they were being manipulated by those words. Great, Ino's a relationship tactician. Naruto mentally growled as he imagined Ino in soldier clothing shooting cannons at Sasuke and Sakura. Shaking his head, he turned back to the fence. Yeah, fawn over Ino later. I've got important training to do after this, and I don't want to waste it talking about manners. Sasuke actually looked flustered for a brief second before his calm facade returned and he picked up his own brush. Sakura was envisioning a second anvil being dropped on her inner's head. Kakashi just kept quiet, wondering when their play would restart. Their teamwork has picked up over the month. And here I thought it was going to run into a glass ceiling, Kakashi muttered as he watched his students attack the fence. Naruto actually pausing from time to time to take his teammates' words into consideration before changing his actions slightly. Sighing contently, Kakashi leaned back against the fence opposite his team and stared up at the sky. As he did so, his eye caught something moving towards the Hokage's tower. Focusing on it, he frowned slightly. So it's that time again? I wonder what I should tell the Hokage. A moment later his team finished the fence, not having much to finish in the first place. Kakashi pulled out his book, figuring now was as good a time as any to send them off. Alright you guys, I'm going to go submit this mission report, then I'll go train, Sasuke said, beginning to walk in the direction of his favorite training ground. Oh! Sakura shouted as she pounced on Sasuke. Sasuke-kun, wait. How about now, we go work on our teamwork, just the two of us? Sasuke glared at Sakura. You're as weak as Naruto. If you have the time to bug me, go practice a jutsu or something. Glancing towards Naruto out of the corner of his eye as he walked away, he scowled at Sakura. In fact, you're even weaker than Naruto. Sakura winced as the words stung her. She'd always imagined herself as above Naruto in ability, but to hear that she was considered weaker, especially by her crush, was a harsh blow. She sulked as she stumbled after Naruto. Naruto, who had begun to walk away when Sasuke had declared that he was going off to train, tried not to twitch as he realized he was being followed. Taking a deep breath, he took another step forward, turned on his heel and jabbed his finger in their direction. Ha! What kind of rock is square with two holes in it? I can see right through that. From beneath the horribly made cardboard rock, Konohamaru and two of his friends emerged. Ah, that's exactly what I'd expect from the man I view as my rival. You haven't gotten weak at all from the last time we met. Ma, it's just you, Konohamaru. Naruto muttered. His attention drifted to the goggles on each of the kids' heads, his eyes widening in recognition. What's with the goggles? Konohamaru chuckled, grabbing the goggles proudly. We're copying the old you boss. Isn't it cool? Naruto's eyes glazed over slightly, remembering his own goggles hidden away in his dresser drawer. Kami, when was the last time I thought about them? Naruto thought, outwardly looking unimpressed. I see. What do you mean I see? That's cold, boss. Konohamaru shouted. Naruto rolled his eyes. It was amazing how loud Konohamaru could be when he wanted someone's attention. So what do you want? The girl of the group, Moegi, answered for Konohamaru, who was sulking to his friend with a constant sniffle udon. We were just wondering if you were free right now, boss. Naruto shook his head. Nope, I'm headed off to train. Konohamaru, not missing a beat, jumped in outrage. You said you'd play shinobi with us. Oh right. Naruto said, rubbing his head nervously. Since the Ino incident, Naruto had made sure that he kept his promises to non-existent. If he said he'd do something, he wasn't held to it, and had more of a chance to choose. If I play with them, I won't get a chance to train, but I kinda want a day to goof off. Especially since I can use them as an ironclad excuse if Ino shows up. Naruto brightened. Alright, let's get started. As the trio cheered their victory, another voice cut in. Why would a shinobi play shinobi? Sakura narrowed her eyes at Naruto, remembering what Sasuke had said. I'm lower than a shinobi who plays with kids. You've got to be kidding me. Meanwhile, Konohamaru was coming to all the wrong conclusions about the situation. Ah, not bad, boss, he said, elbowing Naruto in the side. When Naruto gave him a confused look, he held up his pinky. She's your this. Sakura fumed, mentally begging Naruto to give her a reason. Surprisingly, Naruto waved his hand dismissively. Don't jump to conclusions. She's my teammate. Konohamaru's eyes narrowed, his opinion quickly changing as he looked her over once more. Well, you're right, you got more class than that. I mean, look at that ugly forehead. He squinted his eyes, completely missing Sakura's glare and Naruto's pleading look. Is she even a girl? Naruto looked between Sakura and Konohamaru, trying to decide who he liked more as Sakura's eyes seemed to become all white, and he felt like he was looking at death. Sakura or Konohamaru, this is actually hard. On the one hand is my teammate, on the other is my willing friend and faithful student. I knew I should have just gone to a training ground instead of staying here. Wait a minute, of course. I know what to do. Run away! Naruto shouted, grabbing the three kids by the back of their shirts as he took off. He could hear Sakura's screech of rage and footsteps not too far behind, and pushed himself a little bit faster. Screw normal training, running with three kids weighing me down and a woman's wrath awaiting me if I fail is perfect, Naruto thought, using chakra to stick to a fence he nearly crashed into as he tried to turn a corner. He noticed a guy and girl looking at him with a surprised look as he ran past them, but didn't notice much as he was in a hurry. Get back here, Naruto! Sakura yelled, barely avoiding the same two people as she skidded to a halt before rushing around them. The duo watched the odd chase retreat around another corner before the guy smirked at the girl. Well, that was interesting. If all the brats around here are as stupid and weak as those two, this'll be a lot easier than we thought. The girl rolled her eyes, adjusting a giant fan behind her back. Yeah, whatever, Kankuro. We still need to keep our eyes open. Just because they're weak doesn't mean that they're all weak. Whatever you say, Tamari, Kankuro said dismissively. Both of them missed the two teens in the tree nearby, watching their every move. One watched in curiosity, having noticed them earlier, and decided to follow. The other simply looked on with barely suppressed killing intent. Iruka glared at Kakashi, unable to believe what he'd just said. Worse than that even, Kurenai and Asuma said nothing to contradict what he'd said. Yes, they aren't my students, but to think of them as soldiers? This isn't a war. Sarutobi sighed at the stare-off. He'd known that Iruka was well justified in believing what he was saying, having taken the test 2 years after he'd become a genin. However, it was also the Jonin's decision in the matters of their team, and meant far more than an academy instructor's. If you really feel that they aren't ready, why don't you test them for yourself? Kakashi said, his eye not wavering in the slightest. If Iruka had gained their attention before, Kakashi had just put them all on edge. There was no pretest for the Chunin exams, just the Jonin sensei's approval, and a minimum required mission count of 8. They had heard people object to the Jonin's decisions before, but had never seen a Jonin push back. Hushed whispers carried through the room, most being bets of who would likely win the debate. Iruka paled slightly, but was intrigued by Kakashi's challenge. What exactly do you mean by that? Kakashi grimaced, but explained what he was thinking without hesitation. It's actually pretty straightforward. You think up a test of a shinobi skill that you remember them either excelling or failing at that. If they pass, will allow them to continue on to the Chunin exams. If they fail your test, then they won't be allowed to enter. The murmuring increased, most Chunin now thoroughly confused. Iruka, however, understood what Kakashi was getting at. I see, so you want me to prove that they are ready to take the exams. He scowled as he looked over Kakashi. What if I give them a test that I know that they'll fail at? Kakashi sighed. Then I guess they'll be pushed to their limits, which is what they need to understand if they want to survive in the shinobi world. Iruka scowled. He already knew that he was going to accept, and had already made a plan of action. He figured that while Sakura was the weakest link on the team, Naruto was the wild card they would need if they were to truly survive the second test. Since he knew that Naruto could take on a Chunin by blindsiding them, he was going to test Naruto where he lacked most strength. His mind. Alright Kakashi, I accept. Iruka ignored the other Chunin as they whispered. Let them talk, he thought, staring down Kakashi, whose expression hadn't changed since they began talking. Kakashi felt his team needed the exam, the pain, and real-life experience would help them to grow while humbling them. The way they were now, should that not be severely beaten out of them, they'd die. That being said, he also figured that a smaller test wouldn't hurt their chances, especially since it was their former sensei. What could possibly go wrong? Naruto laughed loudly as he ran away from Konohamaru and his friends, dodging and weaving to avoid the shuriken that they were throwing. They had long since left Sakura in their dust, and had finally gotten around to playing shinobi despite Sakura's moaning that a shinobi shouldn't play games like shinobi. With kids he was having fun. At the beginning, their aim had been horrible. After a few pointers though, they'd rapidly begun to improve and had actually become a challenge to dodge when they worked together. Who would have thought that with just shuriken and teamwork, children could take on a newly minted genin? Dead last of the academy, notwithstanding, it was still infinitely easier than the fight with Haku. But then dodging high-speed needles was nearly impossible compared to the few shuriken they could throw at a time. Twisting in a way that many would think impossible for him, he slid on his side as he flipped to his feet, shuriken in between each finger of each hand and arms crossed over his chest. My turn. The 3 children had no time to think as he unleashed his shuriken, bouncing 2 off of each of them. They pouted as they were forced to admit defeat. Konohamaru, never one to stay down in the dumps for long, rounded on Naruto with stars in his eyes. Wow, that was so cool, boss. Can you teach us how to throw like that? Naruto grinned. Sure. As he showed them how to hold their shuriken to throw them the way he just had, his mind trailed off in nostalgia. Iruka had helped him with a variant of this particularly awesome technique, giving pointers where they needed to be, and adjusting himself so that he wouldn't poke his eye out with the shuriken before he even got around to throwing it. Now that he was teaching it to someone else, he could finally understand why Iruka enjoyed teaching. When they became frustrated, instead of getting frustrated with them, Naruto had to keep cool. Adjusting their arms to the way that he instinctively knew how to position them was actually harder than he thought. But by the time he was teaching Moegi, she'd caught on to what he'd been saying and was able to pick it up faster than the boys. It was a learning experience, as much as it was a teaching experience, and he couldn't be prouder of his pupils. In a nearby tree, dressed in aimed shinobi garb, Iruka watched Naruto training the 3 academy students. Naruto looks like he's doing well. Tilting the hat he wore so that it completely covered his face, he sighed. Forgive me, Naruto, but I can't let you take that exam. You aren't ready. He waited until Moegi had thrown her shuriken again before finally beginning the test, leaping out fast than any of them could see. Iruka scooped Moegi under his arm, leaping onto an adjacent building before they could realize anything was up. Since all eyes had been on Moegi, they were relatively fast in their realization of her disappearance. Oddly, it was Naruto who found him first, his eyes narrow and fists clenched. Who the heck are you? I'm here to ensure that you do not participate in the upcoming Chunin exams. Iruka said, his voice masked with carefully applied chakra. What Chunin exams? Naruto asked warily. Iruka paused, cursing Kakashi under his breath. Surely you were told about the upcoming Chunin exams. Nope. Never heard of them. Naruto said, sticking a finger into his ear to clean it out. Whoever this guy was, he was getting on his nerves with his stupid questions. Of course he'd heard about the stupid exams. Ino hadn't shut up about them for the past week, dragging him around in a search for the perfect outfit to impress Sasuke in. They never found one that was good enough, but it certainly made an impression on the importance of the exams. Fangirl shopping aside, of course. Well then I guess I have no choice, Iruka said, spreading his feet apart to enable him to flee faster. Now that you know of the exams, I cannot allow you to participate. If you choose to ignore my warning, you will never see your little friend again. Moegi, who'd been shouting obscenities beyond her years the whole time, turned her eyes to Naruto in desperation. Boss! Help me! Put Moegi down, you bully! Naruto shouted, his knees bent to leap at any moment. However, before he could move, the Ain shinobi disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto's face scrunched up in rage as he began running down the street. Halfway down, he turned back to Udan and Konohamaru, who'd begun following him. Stay there, I'll get her back. Both Konohamaru and Udan looked distraught at being told not to help their friend. Konohamaru cupped his hands around his mouth, shouting after Naruto. You promise? Naruto didn't flinch or hesitate when he heard the question. Now wasn't the time to worry about the repercussions if he didn't fulfill the promise. I promise, I'll find Moegi and bring her back. There was a shiver that ran up his spine, and a cool feeling in his head. Leaving the street and taking to the rooftops, he growled as he realized he couldn't see any trace of Moegi or her captor. Cursing under his breath, he turned to jump away. As he jumped, a small twinkle caught his eye, and caused him to pause before leaping again. Biting his lip, he hopped over to the object and picked it up. It was a coin, a single yen. However, he had been jumping over the roofs to find the 3 kids earlier, and there hadn't been any sign of any yen previously. Another flash caught his eye, and startled him into lifting his head. Scattered over several roofs was a trail of coins, leading straight to the forest. In a moment of brilliant thinking, he created a shadow clone to pick up the coins as he followed the trail. In forest, Iruka mentally berated himself for kidnapping one of his own students even as he finished tying her to a tree. It was necessary that Naruto understood the true depths of being a shinobi without having to take the Chunin exams. As such, he'd taken every precaution he could before tying Moegi up. He'd covered his tracks, while also moving faster than Naruto would have been able to track. He hadn't had much time to set up traps, but he'd had more than enough time to set up the one thing that Naruto would be unable to defeat in his current state, a genjutsu. Layering it in a ring around his surroundings, should Naruto or anyone else get too close they would eventually find themselves running in circles. Moegi glared daggers at him, obviously unaware of his true identity. When boss finds us, he's going to kick your butt. Iruka shook his head. I've done my research on your boss, he won't be making it here. Not without help. Sticking her tongue out, Moegi continued to stick up Naruto. Oh yeah? Well, he had help. Iruka looked down at the young girl, her impish grin slightly worrying. I left him a trail to follow. He'll find us in no time, sighing as he realized his time would normally have been cut down had he not taken the other precaution. Iruka chuckled. I highly doubt that he had the ability to dispel the genjutsu I placed around us. After all, his record showed no indication of knowing even the basics of genjutsu. Moegi suddenly looked a lot less sure of herself, biting her lip nervously. A moment later though, her resolve picked up full force. He'll just plow right through it then. He'll plow right through it and beat you up. Iruka shook his head. Where do kids get ideas like this? I certainly didn't tell them that. I should probably correct that while I can. You're wrong, he admonished, coming off harsher than he initially meant to. Seeing her wince hurt him, but he had to make sure she didn't get any ideas. No one, not even your friend, could possibly just plow through a genjutsu like a brick. Heroic rescue. Iruka whirled around, his eyes widening in shock as Naruto leapt towards him. Boss! Moegi shouted, obviously glad to see that he'd come. Naruto's face was contorted in rage as he stared down the aimed shinobi. He didn't bother with words, instead barreling towards his foe with single-minded determination. Iruka was caught completely flat-footed and was subsequently knocked from his branch as Naruto struck him. Iruka caught himself in midair, flipping so he stuck to a nearby tree with chakra. Turning back to Naruto, he barely had a second to think before Naruto slammed his heel into his face and returned him on his descent to the ground. I can stick to trees, to dumbass, Naruto shouted. He gripped the tree that Iruka had momentarily occupied and used it as a springboard to fire himself down at Iruka again. Iruka hit the ground and rolled to his feet, managing to cross his arms in defense against Naruto's assault. As Naruto's foot connected with his arms, he winced. When did Naruto get so damn strong? With a heave, he managed to dislodge Naruto from their position, causing Naruto to backflip from their previous position into a ready stance on ground. Looking down at his former student, his eyes widened slightly as he noticed a small amount of what appeared to be white fire that came from beneath Naruto's height. His momentary distraction was all the incentive for Naruto to leap back into the fray. Charging forward, he shot his fist up into Iruka's chin in a fierce uppercut. Iruka stumbled back, rubbing his jaw in shock. Naruto was doing far better than he actually had expected him to do against a superior opponent. Not only that, but he'd managed to land 3 solid blows to him thus far without the use of Kage Bunshin. If this was any measure of Naruto's strength by himself, he honestly didn't want to see how adding an army behind him would be. Leaping back, he tried to put some distance between the two of them. Naruto would have none of it, throwing kunai as he rushed him. Iruka barely had enough time to block the kunai before Naruto leapt at him again. Reacting instinctively, Iruka swung one of his kunai in an attempt to stab him. Realizing his mistake at the last moment, he had no room to correct his error and stop Naruto from ultimately being injured. To his shock, as he struck Naruto, he disappeared in a puff of smoke, revealing a log in his place. Not a second later, Naruto dropped from the trees above and brought his heel down once more onto Iruka's head. Iruka muttered curses under his breath, his hat falling to the side as he stumbled backwards. Naruto had some strange obsession with kicking him in the head, it seemed, and he had no desire to take another blow to the head. Fleeing the scene, he shouted over his shoulder one last warning. You'll regret it if you enter the exams, and you'll regret ever messing with Uzumaki Naruto. Future Hokage. Naruto shouted back. Scowling after him, Naruto turned to untie Moegi when he noticed the hat. Remembering a part of how Kakashi beat Zabuza by smelling him out, a light went on in his head. Creating a shadow clone, he gave it instructions. Fine, Kakashi-sensei. I don't care who tries to stop you, you get to him and give him the hat. He'll be able to find the guy no sweat. Can do, boss. The clone said, saluting him as he grabbed the hat and took off into the forest. Naruto sighed, jumping back up to help Moegi. Cutting through the ropes easily, he looked her over quickly. Did he hurt you? Moegi shook her head. No, boss, I'm fine. Stars seemed to shine in her eyes as she grinned at Naruto. Boss, that was so cool. That AIM Shinobi told me that you wouldn't be able to save me, but I believed in you the whole time. Even when he said that he put up a genjutsu to make you go in circles, I knew you'd be able to get through it. Genjutsu? Naruto tilted his head to the side in a confused manner. He hadn't noticed any genjutsu. Then again, that would explain why his clone hadn't followed him in, and why the enemy shinobi wasn't ready for him. He hadn't expected Naruto to just miss the genjutsu and catch up. Not that Naruto wasn't just as confused as to how he did that either. Moegi nodded. Yeah, and you got through it just as he tried to tell me that you couldn't. You're so awesome, boss. Naruto nodded, not quite listening as he squatted down and motioned for Moegi to hop onto his back. Moegi climbed aboard quickly, her arms gripping his neck rather tightly as they began the trek back to the boys. Her grip tightened a moment later when they heard a rustling in one of the trees in front of them. Naruto was on guard for a second before relaxing immediately as his clone finally caught up to him. Sorry I'm late, but I ran in a circle before I realized something was up. Once again, Naruto tried to figure out how he just missed the genjutsu. Brushing it off for the time being, he motioned the clone over. Did you get all of them? Yep. The clone nodded, pulling all of the yen from his pocket. Thanks for pointing us in the right direction, Moegi. Moegi blushed at the praise, taking the yen back. It was nothing, really. Naruto shook his head. I would have been totally lost if those coins hadn't flashed me down and set me on the right path. Moegi nodded slowly, looking at the coins in her hands as they once again took off. While she was only 9 years old, even she knew that old, rust-covered coins did not just shine, which made her wonder just what other awesome stuff could her boss do if he could see the tiny shine from a little coin. Chapter 6, The First Test. Team 7 stared at their old academy building, each with their own thoughts about the upcoming Chunin exam. Sasuke was interested, wondering if he'd be able to push his limits and become stronger by fighting shinobi from other countries. Sakura was nervous, not quite sure what she was getting herself into. And Naruto, Kami-sama, did I do something to anger you? Naruto said to no one in particular, as he stared at the academy. He remembered how he'd said he'd rather teach at the academy than be Sasuke, and wondered if Kami was using this as a way to test his resolve. "'Cause if I did, I'm sorry and you don't have to try and punish me anymore. And if it's because of the log, I planted the required 5 saplings yesterday." "Naruto, what are you talking about?" Sasuke asked, questioning Naruto's fading sanity. Naruto shook his head. "Nothing, let's just get in there and show just how awesome we are." Both Sasuke and Sakura rolled their eyes at the way Naruto eagerly attempted to jump towards the academy. He looked like a dog, running towards the academy then returning to them with a look that begged them to pick up the pace. It was nice to know that he hadn't changed too much since being with Ino. After walking up the first flight of stairs, they came across a crowd of Chunin hopefuls trying to push their way into the room that said 301. 2 genin stood outside the door, bearing the way into the room. One other genin hopeful was sitting in front of the door, having been knocked to the ground one of the 2 guards. "Ha! You plan on taking the Chunin exams with that?" the other door guard said, smirking at the down genin. "You should quit now. You're just a little kid." His companion nodded in agreement. When the genin's female teammate made to push her way through as well, he backhanded her away from the door, his face never changing as he glared over the crowd. There was muttering from several of the other genin at his blatant attack on a fellow genin. "What did you say?" his friend nodded, crossing his arms over his chest. "This is our kindness. The Chunin exam isn't easy, even we have failed it 3 times straight. Those that take this exam and end up quitting as shinobis, those that die during the exam, we've seen it all. And Chunin often become captains of military teams. The failure of a mission, the death of a comrade, that is all the captain's responsibility." He scoffed at the girl who he'd hit as she picked herself up. "Yet kids like you think you can pass? We're just thinning out those who will fail anyway." "What's wrong with that?" Naruto ignored their little speech, looking at the surrounding crowd in confusion. Leaning over to Sasuke he whispered, "Why is everyone here?" "We only went up one floor." Sasuke nodded. "Yeah? It's probably a genjutsu to make the signs say that it's the wrong room." Naruto scratched his head. "So it's like a test? They're not beating them up because they can't go in the room, but because it's the wrong room?" Sakura groaned, wondering why Naruto was even bothering to say anything. "Yes, Naruto, it's the wrong room. They're just confusing them with the genjutsu so that the people who aren't paying attention like good genin should are weeded out." Sakura blinked, suddenly realizing something. "Wait, you noticed it?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah, it wasn't hard. I mean, we've been to the academy more than foreign shinobi, and I've escaped from the academy more times than I can count, so I know that sort of stuff pretty well." Now both of his teammates were staring at him. Naruto was still the same little idiot, but he'd obviously become more attentive to his surroundings. It was a rather scary prospect. Naruto took the lead, sidling around the crowd of genin, and making his way to the next flight of stairs. His teammates, still gobsmacked by Naruto's strange intelligence, followed him. A few minutes later they stood before the final door to the test, which once again had someone in front of it. This time though, it was Kakashi. "Oh, so Sakura made it," he said lazily, looking over his genin. "Now we can properly take the exam." Sakura flinched at Kakashi's comment, barely catching the hidden meaning. "What do you mean by that, Kakashi-sensei?" Kakashi smiled at Sakura. "The truth is that this test can only be taken by teams of 3. Naruto scratched his head in confusion, remembering the conversation that they'd had with Kakashi the day before. "But Kakashi-sensei, you said that taking this test was an individual choice? You lied to us? If I had told you the truth, you or Sasuke would have pressured Sakura into taking the exam," Kakashi said, turning to Sakura. Naruto had a sheepish look on his face, while Sasuke just flinched. "Even if you didn't want to, if Sasuke had asked you, you would have come. For Sasuke's sake and well Naruto too." Sakura didn't bat an eye at doing it for Naruto, so if only Sasuke and Naruto had shown up, the exam would have ended right there. They wouldn't have gotten any further. Kakashi replied. He looked over his team one more time, his eye turned upward in a smile. "But you all came of your own free will. You guys have made me proud. Now go!" All 3 members of his team grinned widely, turning to the door and walking in. A moment after they'd entered, Kakashi sighed. "You can come out now, Irika." From behind a nearby corner, Irika stepped out. He appeared fine for the most part, however, the main change in his appearance was a dark bruise on his forehead. He scowled at Kakashi before staring after his former students. "How do you think they'll do? And I mean really, how will they do?" Kakashi shrugged, not answering Irika's question. Truth be told, he truly didn't know how well they would do. Sasuke might do decently, but he needed to be knocked down a peg or two if he truly wanted any kind of shot at defeating his brother. Sakura needed to experience the real world, outside of her fangirl mindset. Naruto though, he honestly couldn't say anything for or against Naruto, mainly because he didn't know. If one were to take all of the different elements needed to become a Chunin, Naruto wouldn't make it to Chunin. His genjutsu skills were non-existent, his intelligence was subpar, and he barely had any useful ninjutsu. He did have very inventive uses for different combinations of the jutsus he had, but a Chunin that did not make. He had a long way to go before he had the taijutsu skill, but if they were to judge him on pure brawling skills, and odd observations, he would have a shot. Irika sighed, rubbing the bruise on his head. Kakashi took note of it, his curiosity piqued. "How'd that happen, Naruto?" Irika stuttered, remembering the fight. Had Naruto been a real enemy, and had done what he'd done against Mizuki, create a one-man army or shadow clone, Irika would have been left a broken smear on the ground, which wasn't a part of the test whatsoever. Kakashi raised his eyebrow at that. He'd expected Naruto to give Irika a run for his money, but to actually land a solid blow against Irika was impressive. "He actually managed to hit you?" Irika nodded. 3 times. "And you've obviously got his ability to detect genjutsu far above what he could do in the academy." "Really? But I haven't taught him anything about genjutsu," Kakashi said. Irika blinked in shock. But he got through the genjutsu I set up. If he didn't know how to dispel it, then how?" "I don't know." Kakashi stared at the door where his team had just left with his eyes slightly widened. That was unexpected. Kakashi winced, resisting the urge to slap his face. Then again, we really shouldn't have underestimated the most unpredictable shinobi of Konohagakure. Turning from Irika, he walked to the Jonin lounge. As he walked, his mind tumbled with the new information Irika had given him. He knew that the Sharingan and Byakugan could see the chakra flow, so they could know when they were caught in the genjutsu and dispel it easier, and there were other clans like the Yuhi and Kurama that showed prowess in said art. However, not even the Sharingan could simply look through genjutsu. That was a skill he never heard of before, mainly because according to everything they knew, it was impossible. Frowning, he decided he would take it up with the Sandaime after the second test had started. He would find out what was going on no matter what it took. A chill ran up Naruto's spine, his eyes wide in terror and teeth clenched. He knew that it would happen eventually, however he was hoping that it wouldn't happen until after the Chunin exams. Or never would have been so much better. "Sasuke-kun, did you miss me?" Ino asked, hanging off of Sasuke's shoulder. Thanks to some advice from Naruto, Ino had altered her attire slightly. Like her outfits before, she had a midriff-showing purple shirt and skirt, her height worn like a belt, bandages around her midriff and legs, and arm warmers. However, despite her lack of real obvious change, there were subtle things. Like how instead of white, the bandages and arm warmers were black. The arm warmers had a thick dark red leather straps hanging slightly off them from wrist to elbow. While they looked pointless, they actually had the purpose of holding hidden kunai or other weapons she wanted to sneak into them in them. If she ever was captured, and still had her arm warmers, she would still have a weapon on hand. Plus, it did make them look even cooler. How Ino had managed to sneak onto Sasuke's shoulder, Naruto didn't know. All he knew was that he had to move away from Ino now, and anywhere where she wouldn't be able to see him. Thankfully, another team was headed their way, and were the human shields he currently needed. Sneaking away from Ino, he grinned widely at the approaching group. Hey guys, what's up? He knew who the first guy was. His scruffy hair, little white dog, and red marks on his cheeks identified him as Inuzuka Kiba. Kiba grinned as Naruto approached. Hey Naruto! He looked past Naruto at Naruto's teammates, his feral grin widening as he saw Sasuke and the rest of the rookies behind him. It looks like the gang's all here. Naruto shrugged, keeping his eyes straight ahead. Yeah, I guess we are. He looked at Kiba's teammates, unable to recognize either of them. The girl on his team had a baggy jacket, and pupil-less lavender eyes. He vaguely remembered her as Hyuga Hinata. The other guy on his team had a high-collared jacket, spiky brown hair, and dark sunglasses that didn't allow anyone to see his eyes. Naruto didn't remember who he was, having never interacted with him. Naruto didn't particularly care seeing as he and his team would be helping keep him away from Ino. Yeah, we are. Naruto muttered, looking between the three. So what's new? Kiba grinned. We've been learning all sorts of cool stuff since we became a team. Plus, our teamwork has gotten so that we're totally awesome we could take on anyone. Naruto raised an eyebrow, wondering just how much stronger they'd become. Kiba had been pretty boastful in the academy, though he'd been pretty good at holding up to his word all things considered, which meant that if he'd gotten better, that might actually be saying something. Hey Naruto, come over here. Naruto went ramrod straight at the voice, paling slightly. Slowly he turned around. Sure enough, Ino was staring at him with a coy smile. Naruto shuddered as she motioned for him to come over. Ignoring her would be a very bad idea, though he wasn't exactly known for having bright ideas in social situations. Turning back to the other team, he tried to get back into conversation with them. Unfortunately, Sakura noticed. Naruto, come over here, she said in a sickeningly sweet tone. Naruto paused, shaking his head. No, Sakura's eyebrow twitched dangerously, promising pain if he didn't do as she said. Naruto shook his head again. With a stomp of her foot, she began to march over. Right before she got to him, there was an explosive blast of smoke in the front of the room. Sit down and shut up, you maggots. There were a few startled shouts as all eyes were directed to the front of the room. Any and all talking in the room ended as the bandana and trench coat wearing Jonin entered the room, a small entourage of Chunin following after him. He had a dangerous aura around him that put all the Chunin hopefuls on edge, no matter what village they were from. His sharp gaze pierced them all as it swept over the room. Thank you for waiting. I am Marino Ibiki, the examiner for the Chunin exam's first test. Seeing the frightened look of the genin, he chuckled. I'm going to lay down some rules that you all will follow. There will be no fighting without the permission of the examiner. Even if permission is given, killing your opponent will not be tolerated. If any of you fail to follow these rules, you will fail instantly. Do I make myself clear? He asked, his eyes shadowed by his bandana. Seeing no one objecting to his rules, he continued. We will now start the first test in the Chunin exams. Instead of your current seating, you will pick a tab and sit in the seat assigned to you. We will then hand out the exams. There was a pause that could almost be heard throughout the room as they processed what he'd said. Naruto voiced a great deal of the confusion as his mind caught on. What? A paper test? Iruka groaned as he walked into the classroom. While most Chunin were helping with the Chunin exams, he was still working in the academy papers. Yeah, enjoy some downtime during the weekend. I've never had a day off since I started teaching. With another sigh, he went back to his papers, chuckling under his breath as he remembered the first test of the Chunin exam. While it was definitely different in their own ways, he still found that Konoha had the monopoly for the most humorous intelligence-gathering test. After all, no one really enjoyed paper tests. Once they'd gotten out into the field, they wanted more action, fighting, and overly dramatic jutsu. A paper test usually appeared degrading at first glance. Well, Sakura might be an exception to that. He muttered, remembering how the young girl had constantly had her nose in one book or another, memorizing information and learning to speak in the same incomprehensible gibberish most books consisted of. Point was, she was smart, and the test might actually be considerably more easy for her than for his other students. With a small sigh, he picked up another paper. Smiling as he read the name, Sarutobi Konohamaru, he gave it a quick once-over. He resisted the need to palm his face as he read over some of the ridiculous answers to the questions. What do you do if one of your teammates is captured? He read before turning his attention to his answer. Promise your friends that you'll bring them back and then beat the bad guys up. If only life were that simple. He rubbed the bruise on his forehead, once again reminded of his confrontation with Naruto. It was true, he'd had to play the bad guy, and truth be told, Naruto had done exactly what Konohamaru had put on his paper. It wasn't the right answer, but it obviously held true for certain situations. He marked him half points, and moved on to the next question. By the third question, Iruka had to push the paper away from himself, and take a breath to keep from going out and throttling Naruto. Every single answer that Konohamaru had put down for the other day's test had something to do with their encounter. He'd have figured that Naruto had more tact than to fill their heads with useless information that could get them killed if they weren't careful. This was why Naruto wouldn't make Chunin. Yo! Yelping and falling out of his chair, Iruka groaned as he recognized who had just spoken. And this is why I'm not a jonin. Freaking sneaky jonin always getting the drop on me. What do you want, Kakashi? He asked with a hint of venom. He'd bowed out in the academy because it wouldn't have been very professional. Here, in his home, he didn't feel quite the same way. Ma, that's no need to bite my head off, Kakashi said, obviously taunting the fallen man. That was totally worth it. Iruka picked himself up, turning away from Kakashi. I understand that Naruto and his team have entered the Chunin exams of their own free will, so if you're here to reprimand me further there's no need. Kakashi shook his head, reaching behind himself. No need. I was just making a delivery. Iruka heard something being placed on his desk and tensed up slightly. Turning back to Kakashi and his desk, he froze at what had been placed there. For there, sitting in all its fake glory, was his AIM shinobi hat. Naruto gave it to me, Kakashi explained, taking a step back from the hat. He'd yelled something about him not being able to track down some AIM shinobi who tried to kidnap one of his friends. Then he'd stopped and remembered that I could track stuff, and he asked me to find the guy so he could beat him up. I smiled at the shocked Iruka. I told him I'd do it for him. Iruka tensed, waiting for the onslaught that was bound to come. When Kakashi didn't just start beating on him, he bit his lip. So, you're here to finish what Naruto started? Should I tease him some more? Kakashi thought, mentally shrugging. Iruka had obviously had enough of his games. No, you're not the guy I'm looking for. You're a fellow Konoha shinobi, not an AIM shinobi. Iruka let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Looking back to the hat, he thought over what had just happened. Naruto, the fool of his class and Hokage dreamer, had admitted that he wasn't all-powerful. He had bowed to someone superior, and asked him to help him where he was not as capable. Maybe there was some hope for Naruto being a Chunin yet. Naruto was having a small major panic attack. The problem? He actually knew more than half of the information on the academy exams, but didn't bother filling any of it out as it really didn't seem to have any importance to him in the future. Now though, with the uber-difficult test in front of him, he silently wondered if filling out the other stuff on the test really would have made any difference at all. He looked over the test again, not able to understand the questions at all. It didn't help that when he became too frustrated with one question, he jumped to the next only to find it harder than the first. The worst part was when he went back to the first question, only to find that it seemed to be an even more confusing jumble of nonsense. Next to him, Hinata was covertly looking over the shoulder of another genin hopeful who was answering his test. Thanks to the Byakugan, which allowed her to see all around as well as through objects, she had no difficulty seeing his test from where she was seated. It also gave her a chance to see Naruto's test without having to turn her head. Feeling his desperation, she calmly turned off her Byakugan. Turning slightly towards Naruto, she whispered, not much of a change for her all things considering to him. Naruto-kun, you can look off of my test if you want. Naruto blinked, unsure if he'd heard Hinata right. She'd risk getting into trouble so that I could look off her test? Sweet. Answers, here I come. But wait, what if they're watching me? Covertly, he looked around the room. Several Chunin proctors had their eyes on him, or on the people around him. If he were to just copy her answers, because he sucked at cheating like that, he would get caught and they'd probably both get in trouble for it. Swallowing his desire to just take her up on her offer, he gave her the biggest smile he could. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Hinata couldn't help but wonder if that were really true, but felt that if Naruto knew what he was doing, she would believe in him. Nodding, she turned her attention back to her now overturned test paper. Behind them, Ino muttered a string of curses. Of course Naruto wouldn't take answers from Hinata, he's too nice. God, if he fails and makes Sasuke-kun fail, it'll look bad for me. I mean, he let me hang off his shoulder and seemed really interested in our conversation. Naruto is the key to getting Sasuke's attention. She tapped her chin with her pencil thoughtfully, going over what options she had of getting Naruto to pass his test. She already had her test answers, and had them memorized for future usage. There were mirrors on the ceiling that another team was already using that she could redirect in Naruto's direction. Maybe she could switch bodies with Shikamaru and, dang, I'm slow today. Ino mentally muttered as she formed the hand seal for her family's technique. The Shintenshin no Jutsu, mind-body switch technique, was really useful, especially in this particular instance. While this was almost in a more battle-distance sort of range, Naruto wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, so she could take all the time she needed. Taking aim, she quickly shot herself into Naruto. Naruto jerked upwards slightly, an uncharacteristic smirk crossing his face as he calmly began writing down the answers to the test. After all, Sakura had already given the answers to Ino. Why not help out Naruto too? As Naruto got to the sixth answer, she felt an elbow to her side. With a scowl, she turned Naruto to face whoever had him her when she paused at the sight in front of her. Hinata was giving her the meanest glare she could. Considering she had her Byakugan activated again, it was actually far more intimidating than it would be normally. What are you doing, Ino-san? Hinata whispered, turning her eyes forward. She didn't want to get caught talking, but after seeing Ino shoot herself into Naruto, she was both curious and enraged by Ino's actions. After all, it made no sense for Ino to do something like that. Ino pouted, which was pretty funny seeing Naruto do as she responded. Naruto's a half-wit who barely has the mental capabilities to get dressed in the morning. If he fails, he'll be taking Sasuke-kun down with him. I'm not going to just sit by and let him do that. Hinata bit her lip, wondering if it would be okay just this once to act out and juke Ino to death. She'd have to do it to the real Ino though, seeing as she was currently occupying Naruto's body, which would mean she'd have to go to the back of the class, which would make a big scene, and she really didn't want to be the center of attention. With a sigh of regret, she allowed Ino to continue taking Naruto's test for him. Ino grinned as she wrote down the last answer to the test. She ignored putting the steps to get her answers, not wanting people to wonder how Naruto got so smart. They just figured that he was blatantly cheating off someone else, and just put the answer down because he was too lazy. Sounds like Shika, she thought, smirking at the thought of her lazy friend. Quickly writing a quick note for Naruto on the back of his hand, she made to make the sign to release her jutsu when she thought of something. She was in Naruto's head. A scary concept, to be sure, but also one of infinite possibilities. Instead of asking him directly, she could just go through his memories, watch what he'd watched, and come to her own conclusions without his droning on about one thing or another. The corners of Naruto's mouth twitched upwards slightly. Maybe I'm doing better than I thought. Relaxing, and falling in on herself, she pulled herself into Naruto's mindscape. Everyone had one. A place they had created to store all of their memories, personal thoughts, etc. For a Yamanaka, entering their own was actually the first step in learning the Shintenshin no Jutsu, seeing as the user would have to intimately understand their conscious mind before they could just leave their bodies to their simpler subconscious. Naruto's mindscape was rather surprising for her. She honestly hadn't drifted into anyone else's mindscape before though, since she tried to respect their privacy for the most part, so she had nothing but her own mindscape to compare it to. Her own mindscape was a garden, large enough to reflect her memories from the center of each flower. Certain memories were grouped together, with others pressed and framed for memories she wanted to continually remember. It was a very impressive trick that the Yamanaka did to improve their techniques. Learning their techniques, pressing them, and then going over them to better perform their techniques. For Naruto, she'd imagined the Hokage Monument, or some other ramen-based extravaganza. Instead, it was simple, and quite quaint. In fact, she was pretty sure she'd just been sitting in this exact room a moment before, albeit, there had been other people there. Wait a second, Ino muttered. She looked around more carefully, noting the room she was in. Looking around a second time, she was now certain of it. This was one of the Academy's rooms. It was empty, but that might have just been because this was somewhere Naruto had made for future reference that he hadn't said anything to. After a couple of seconds, she pushed herself up and walked out of the room. Surprisingly, unlike the actual Academy, the halls were at least 3 times wider, similar to the Hokage's tower. Shrugging, seeing as it wasn't something she was concerned about, she began looking for a Sasuke room or whatever Naruto had for Sasuke. Glancing around the halls as she passed them, she noticed all sorts of weird rooms. There were rooms committed to specific memories, others for jutsu, or rather future jutsu seeing as he only had 5 usable jutsu, even a room with a giant bowl of ramen in it. Just as she felt she was going to have to give up, she saw it, the dark hole in the floor. She almost passed by it not really that overly shiny to see. However, it was just out of place enough to stand out when she looked over it. She grinned when she saw it, figuring it was his useless information dump, an area where people put memories they didn't want to remember, but still did. Her own was a cyclone of leaves, each carrying their own memory with it. Jackpot, she said, marching towards it. Naruto had made this very difficult to find, his mind was a maze, and she was just past being patient about getting the information. Just as she was about to leap down, a hand grabbed her shoulder. Startled by the contact, she jumped around, nearly falling back into the hole. As her eyes connected with her assailant, her heart just about jumped into her throat. The person behind her was not Naruto. He had the build, the structure that was so familiarly Naruto, but his appearance was not. He was dressed in snow-white clothes, a jumpsuit similar to the one the original Naruto wore though completely plain, white sandals, and white fingerless gloves. His hair hung limply, its red tone like a smoldering fire. His face had stress lines, like one who'd lived too long, seen too much, and just hadn't died yet. Heavy bags under his eyes were from an obvious lack of sleep were both troubling, and oddly accentuated his eyes. And what eyes they were! Their entirety of the eye was black, save for a single dot of white that was obviously some sort of pupil. She stared into the soulless void, unable to break eye contact. She was lost in the emptiness, stripped bare of all thoughts as her mind focused only on his eyes. It seemed like an eternity for her before she realized that he was staring back. "You're not allowed here," he said, his voice echoing throughout the hallway. Ino shivered, not understanding what was happening. "I'm allowed here," she said, trying hopelessly to sound defiant. Naruto promised, "No." As this strange person shouted, Ino froze, feeling a sudden weight in her chest. Unable to breathe, she collapsed on the floor, desperately scratching away for air while trying to move away from the person in front of her. She didn't get far before she was picked back up, being forced to once again gaze into the void that was his eyes. "Begone, mind walker. You have overstayed your welcome." Not a second later, Ino's body jolted upright as her soul returned to it. She bit back a gasp, as she tried not to draw attention to herself. Covertly looking around, she realized that none of the Chunin had noticed her sleeping, or had mentioned it to anyone. With a heavy sigh, she hugged herself as she tried not to shiver at the memory of whatever that had been in Naruto's mind. A few rows ahead, Naruto blinked in confusion as he woke up, rubbing his eyes sleepily. He looked over at the clock. "Oh crap. I dozed off and ran out of time. The 10th question is coming up, and I didn't write any what the..." Black ink on the back of his hand caught his attention, snapping him out of a near frenzy of panic. Looking closer at what was written, he bit back a curse. He turned over his test, looking over the answer test. Biting his cheek to keep from cursing, he sighed as he sunk into his chair. "You owe me big time, Ino." That was the only thing he could think of. Ino had told him that she'd recently been taught and mastered one of her clan's techniques that allowed her to make people do stuff without knowing they did it somehow. And she'd used it on him to give him the answers to put him in her debt, as if having to do whatever she said as long as it had to do with Sasuke wasn't enough. "Okay," Ibiki said, cutting through the testing monotony. "We will now start the 10th question." Chapter 7, Seal Markings. Kabuto walked down the streets of Konohagakure no Sato, his gait heavy and seemingly distraught. His purpose was unclear to most who saw him, though those who'd seen him before and knew that the Chunin exams were in Konoha, and that he had yet to pass said exams yet had an idea. And they'd be right, Kabuto wasn't taking the Chunin exams this year. Orochimaru had given him a better matter to take care of. Through his years in the village, both Kabuto and Orochimaru had found something interesting. There were people registered in the village who were not actually in the village for the majority of the time. Danzo's route could have been the cause for some of the missing persons, but the numbers and placement of said people were too odd for it to only be Danzo. After all, what use could normal, untrained civilians have in Danzo's group? Which led Kabuto to where he was now, walking the retired sector of the village, and looking for clues. This particular sector was dedicated to shinobi who had some reason or another to quit the shinobi force and needed a livelihood to settle into. There were plenty of other genin who came here to see what their potential future could be if they didn't pass the Chunin exams, so he didn't seem out of place. In fact, a few would probably ask what he was doing there, seeing as he was very optimistic about his lack of promotion. Him being in the retired sector sounded like he was giving up. Kabuto shook his head at the foolish thoughts of his fellow genin like he was actually on their level. No, he was here for another reason. He was here to see one of the older retirees who had once been a rather skilled mednin. His purpose, interrogation. Pushing his glasses to the bridge of his nose, he came to a stop as he looked at the address he was looking for. A fake smile on his face, and looking as fake and naive as ever, he looked over the building. It was quite large, at least 3 stories tall. There were few windows, obviously to bar anyone from entering into places they shouldn't, with a wide arch leading to the front of the building. Walking calmly to the door, he paused as he noticed someone sitting on the porch. Approaching with a bit more caution, his eyes narrowed slightly as he got a better look. He would not let someone get the drop on him. He was a rather young man, maybe a year younger than himself, with a lanky build, and dirty blonde hair that appeared to have brown streaks in certain parts. He was dressed in clothes that he hadn't seen on too many people. A long-sleeved white flannel shirt with a brown vest buttoned up over it, dark green slacks, and squared-off sandals. It vaguely appeared like one of the foreign civilians that came through from time to time. However, the mask was definitely Konoha property. It was a mask of a monkey, grinning brightly at any and all who saw it. The eye portion had been covered with one-way glass to allow whoever was looking through them to see him without him being able to see their eyes. It looked like the umbu mask of a rookie member who still lacked the professionalism to simply allow the mask to remain with its impassive look. He blinked as he suddenly realized he'd been staring. "I'm sorry, I've just never seen a mask like that." "Did you make it yourself?" The young man said nothing for a moment, slowly turning to Kabuto. Then, his head snapped up, jumping in excitement. "Oh yeah? I wanted to be an umbu, but washed out of becoming a genin shortly after passing the entrance exams." "Those jonin sure don't mess around." Kabuto nodded, remembering his own test. It had been sickeningly easy to figure out what his sensei had wanted to see in them. Since his teammates had been subjects to some of Orochimaru's projects, they listened to him without a second thought. After all, he was closer to Orochimaru than they were, and if he gave a good report on them, Orochimaru might find them of enough worth to empower. The only real difficulty was hiding his real skills so that his sensei wouldn't see anything out of place. The young man suddenly stopped jumping, his head tilted to the side in a confused manner. Kabuto allowed himself to act the part of curious genin a bit more. "Is there something on my face?" "Yeah, your glasses." the young man said in a way that was completely serious. Kabuto chuckled at the joke. It was a bad joke, but laughing might be beneficial. I was looking for Yamanaka Aizo. I was wondering if… Nope. Kabuto paused, wondering if he'd heard him right. I'm sorry? No can do. The young man replied, nodding his head as he spoke. You don't have an appointment, so I can't let you in. That's the rule. Kabuto nodded slowly. He hadn't heard of this rule, but it could have been that it was just something that he'd overlooked when seeking him out. If he couldn't find anything on setting up an appointment with him, he'd just have to do things the hard way. Very well. I'll come back when I have an appointment. Thank you for informing me of my mistake. Alrighty then, see you later. The young man said, waving his hand wildly as Kabuto walked away. Kabuto just grinned as his face was shadowed, pushing his glasses back into place. Obviously others knew of the so-called secret technique Yamanaka Aizo had developed, and were seeking it out as well. That simply wouldn't do. Grinning darkly, he made plans on how he would extract the information from him. Back at the porch, the young man stared after Kabuto as he rounded a corner. His hand slowly fell back down to his side, and his foot began to tap to an unheard beat. So, Yakushi Kabuto has decided to pay us a visit, he muttered, turning on his toes and walking into the house. Aizo-sensei will want to hear about my new friend's exploits. If we get separated next time, Sasuke said as Team 7 huddled together shortly after the AIM shinobi had ambushed them. Even if it's one of us, don't trust them. This could happen again. Despite all that had just happened, Sasuke obviously didn't blame Naruto for being caught. Sakura was too busy trying not to freak out from everything that was currently going on to really care what had happened to Naruto. She just wanted some way of knowing things would be okay. Naruto was in a similar, if more self-attacking state. Man, I totally got taken off guard by that guy. Scowling, he looked to the side. I won't let it happen again. No one's blaming you, Naruto. It could have happened to any of us, Sasuke said, surprised that Naruto was taking this so hard. Since they'd come into the forest, Sasuke had been appointed temporary leader. Temporary because Naruto wanted a chance to shine at some point and needed to make sure he kept a level head. If anything, I wouldn't have been able to get out of that without you. You were able to help me, just like I helped you. That's what teammates do. Naruto nodded, grabbing the gravel beneath his hands. He knew that, he just felt so weak. He hadn't done much in the fight, and had been the one caught off guard. Plus, if they tried to imitate someone else, even with whatever Sasuke's plan was, he would ultimately be susceptible to even the weakest of genjutsu. Genjutsu. Naruto thought, his mind beginning to whirl. When he'd rescued Moegi, he'd went right through the genjutsu the AIM shinobi had apparently put up, which would be an awesome asset to the team. The only thing that he remembered about how he'd done it was thinking about his promise to Konohamaru and Udon. Biting his lip, he took a steadying breath for what he was about to do. You guys, he said, getting their attention. I promise you, I'll do whatever I can to make sure we get to the tower alive. Both Sakura and Sasuke blinked in confusion, but seemed more at ease by the promise. Naruto felt the familiar feeling that came with the promise, and sighed in relief. That takes care of that. When Sasuke told them his idea for a code word, and gave it to them though, Naruto felt every muscle in his neck tighten. He'd figured that his promise would mean that he'd remember the code word or something, but what came out of Sasuke's mouth sounded as much like gibberish as anything else he might have said. Cursing under his breath when Sasuke wouldn't repeat it for him, he was surprised when Sasuke handed him a black scroll. I put a subtle genjutsu on this scroll to look like the real Earth scroll if you get caught, and need to get away, use this to get away, Sasuke said as he stood up. I'll hold on to the other scroll. Naruto sighed, pocketing the scroll in his pouch. A second after he did so, a small rock hit him in the face. Grimacing in pain, he turned to the source, and was propelled away from his team by the violent oncoming wind. Orochimaru looked between the two genin in front of him. One was a civilian's daughter, of no real consequence, and of little skill. The other was Uchiha Sasuke, son of the former head of the former elite Uchiha clan. At least, before they'd been wiped out by Sasuke's older brother. Sasuke showed no fear towards Orochimaru, glaring him down as though he were simply another genin in the exams. Normally, this tactic would work seeing as it was 2 against 1. Well, 3 against 2, but they didn't need to know that. After all, it wouldn't be fun to let someone else handle what he could do alone. It wasn't Naruto again? The girl asked, obviously slow on the uptake. Orochimaru gave her a moment to figure out whatever it was that Sasuke already knew, knowing that civilian-born shinobi usually had a certain lack of battle sense that clan-raised shinobi had. Smirking, Orochimaru pulled out their scroll, already knowing that they needed it to pass this part of the exam. Even if it had been the wrong one, it would have appeared to be the right scroll. After all, he needed bait for them to take. You want my Earth scroll, right? Since you guys have the Heaven scroll. Taking the scroll and wrapping his tongue around it, he slowly shoved it down his throat. Dramatics always were rather enjoyable, especially since these two were so green, they likely hadn't met a shinobi like him. Then again few were. Finishing pushing the scroll down, he sighed as he put his finger beneath his lower eyelid. Now we can begin the battle for our scrolls with our lives on the line. Were it not for the fact he was projecting his killing intent in such a concentrated way, he would have laughed at their terror. This was nothing. Compared to some of the people Orochimaru had known and met, he would have laughed in the face of anyone who tried to throw something so weak at him. Sasuke hunched over, hurling what had once been his lunch onto the forest floor. Orochimaru didn't bother reacting to it, instead remaining seemingly calm. Inwardly, he applauded that they hadn't reached for their kunais yet. It would be such a waste to hunt down the mighty last Uchiha, only for him to kill himself before the real hunt actually began. He did allow himself some satisfaction, seeing them both trembling in fear. The little civilian girl was even crying. His old sensei must have been going senile if he let a girl like her out into the field. You can no longer move, he muttered, watching as Sasuke reached for a kunai. And he'd had such high hopes for him. Whipping his hand, he flung 2 kunai towards them. He didn't need to waste more than that. Before it reached them, he watched Sasuke use the kunai he'd grabbed to stab himself in the leg. His mind now overriding the fear with pain, he moved and grabbed his teammate. Orochimaru's eyes never left him as he attempted to escape from him. As I thought, he's no ordinary prey, he thought, forming hand seals for a summoning. Naruto grimaced as he shook himself of as much of the snake goo from his clothing. It was official, his clothes would smell for the rest of their short-lived life. With a sigh, he continued on, not bothering to remove his slightly goo-covered jacket. Some would say that this was a very stupid thing to do, seeing as smelling like snake goo would attract any shinobi who was capable of tracking him by scent. However, Naruto didn't care about that. His entire frame seemed to be pushed faster as his thoughts raced through different possibilities of what kind of jutsu could do that. A natural forest-based hurricane? He thought before shaking his head. Nah, a hurricane would have taken down some of the trees too. It was probably just a normal, really overpowered gust of wind, yeah. Recognizing that the gust of wind had been a jutsu was impressive for him, or would have been if his mind hadn't been throwing out more questions. He'd made a promise to his teammates, so why wasn't he getting the benefits that he'd gotten saving Moegi? He'd made the promise, and felt it take hold just the way it was supposed to, but now he was once again cut off from his teammates. Dang it, if I'm not fast enough my teammates could die, Naruto shouted, pushing himself faster amongst the tree branches. Amazingly, as soon as he said it he noticed something off about his chakra control. When he pushed off, he remained stuck for an extra second. This in turn was making him be unable to get the proper propulsion he needed to really move faster. To test this, he changed his chakra grip on the tree so that extra second was gone. The result was instantaneous. His speed nearly doubled, and he actually found that he had a hard time seeing most of the forest out of the corners of his vision. Putting that away for later, he kept pushing faster towards his teammates. Landing silently, his eyes widened as he saw some genin coming out of the carcass of a dead snake. Reaching quickly into his shinobi pouch, he whipped out a batch of kunai and shuriken. His eyes narrowed as the genin rapidly approached his team, and he launched his volley as hard as he could. The genin stopped a moment before the weapons impacted, which probably saved their life. When the kunai struck the branch, they were buried to the point that only a sliver of the blade was still visible. The genin stared at them for a moment, before lifting their head. Naruto grinned, remembering that they probably wouldn't trust him without the code word. Despite not remembering a single part of it, he spoke confidently. Sorry Sasuke, but I forgot the code word. Sakura immediately brightened upon seeing him. Great job Naruto. Sasuke on the other hand, didn't look nearly as happy. Naruto, I know you think you're cool and here to save us but forget it. Run away! This one's on a whole other level. The genin chuckled at their display. It looks like you defeated that giant snake Naruto-kun. This genin looked like a snake. So he's the one, Naruto thought as he narrowed his eyes. So, you're picking on the weak, huh? Then, Sasuke did something very out of character. His eyes, once blazing with his clan's Sharingan, faded back to their normal onyx color and turned away from their opponent as he held out their heaven scroll. I'll give you the scroll. Please take it and leave us. Naruto was shell-shocked, feeling a righteous rage building up inside him. Sasuke! What are you talking about? Why would you give our scroll to the enemy? The other genin returned to a more human state, smirking at Sasuke's attempt to negotiate. Very smart. The only way to escape a predator is to give the predator a different meal. Take it, Sasuke said, throwing the scroll towards the other genin. Naruto's eyes widened, not able to fully understand what was going on. This didn't mean that he was going to just let it slide. Using his new chakra speed, he flew forwards and snatched the scroll away before it got halfway across. Still speeding forwards, he landed just behind Sasuke. Sasuke, in a blind rage caused mainly by fear of what would happen thanks to Naruto, rounded on Naruto. You idiot! What do you think you're doing? Do you understand the situation? Naruto didn't flinch as he too whirled back towards Sasuke, slamming a heavy blow to Sasuke's cheek, knocking him off balance on the branch. Leaping away from his crazed teammate, Sasuke continued to shout. What was that for? Sakura was also confused, though quite a bit less vocal than she normally was. Naruto, what are you doing? Breathing heavily, Naruto searched through his gut to find some inkling towards the truth. His promise may not have been able to help him when they were ambushed, but it could most certainly help him now. After all, not knowing if this was his real teammate or not was a matter of life and death. I don't remember the code word, so I can't be tested, but you're Sasuke's fake, aren't you? Naruto said. As he said it, he felt a mild burning sensation in his gut. Since he wasn't clutching his gut in agony, he was on the right track. You moron, I'm the real Sasuke. Sasuke spat back. Liar, Naruto said, the burning sensation fading away. There's no way the coward in front of me is the Sasuke I know. I don't know how strong this guy is, but what guarantee is there that he'll let us go if we give him the scroll? You're both too freaked out to understand the situation. Behind his mask, Orochimaru was somewhat impressed. It wasn't Sasuke, but his no-name teammate had understood that simple fact. Truly, there was more to him than met the eye. Kukuku, Naruto-kun, you are correct, Orochimaru said, pulling up the sleeve on his left arm, revealing a special tattoo on it. Especially since I can just kill you and take the scroll. Wiping a trail of blood down the tattoo, he began making hand signs. Before he'd finished wiping the blood down, Naruto had burst forward. Strength surged through him as his movements became faster than even before. Shut up, Orochimaru smirked, hearing Sasuke yell for Naruto to stop. Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning technique. Naruto, who was mere feet from delivering a powerful haymaker, was caught off guard as a giant snake appeared beneath the genin he was about to hit. In midair, and unable to defend himself, he took a powerful blow that sent him crashing upwards through several smaller branches before slamming into a particularly thick branch. Naruto coughed up blood, his mind drawing a momentary blank as he regained his bearings. Seeing the snake beneath him, and more importantly the genin riding it, he felt rage grow within him. He heard something about being allowed to eat him, and realized that if he didn't do something, he was going to die. Die. Like hell! Naruto shouted, slamming the snake's mouth shut with a powerful punch. From deep within himself, he felt an immense power flooding through him, shouting at him to crush the enemy before him. Unfortunately, without the sudden realization of death so imminent for the moment, he was caught off guard by the large but relatively harmless fireball that struck him. Landing near Sasuke in an undignified heap, he groaned in pain. That was a bad idea. Sasuke's eyes widened as he watched Naruto attempt to go toe-to-toe with the once untouchable genin. That's Naruto? Meanwhile, Orochimaru was enjoying his little discovery. Well now, this is becoming quite interesting, he thought as he directed his snake towards Sasuke. Sasuke-kun, now it's your turn. What will you do? He didn't have to do anything. Naruto moved before he even realized that he moved, stopping the snake from eating Sasuke. He'd once again drawn on the immense power, thought this time was different. There was no additional malice, just the overwhelming desire to protect Sasuke and Sakura, and to stand his ground against this guy who thought he could just waltz around and say he was going to kill his teammates. Panting from overexertion, Naruto glanced up at Sasuke. Hey, are you alright, scaredy cat? Sasuke stared back into Naruto's blue eyes, seeing nothing but amusement at his fear. Sasuke remembered saying something similar to Naruto after the fight with the Oni, demon, brothers, and cursed his fearful state. So caught up in his berating himself, he nearly missed Naruto being picked up by their enemy's tongue. Hey! Let go of me! Naruto shouted, pointlessly flailing about in a desperate attempt to break free. Kukuku, so the Kyuubi brat is still alive. Orochimaru muttered, noting Naruto's eyes turn red as he wildly attempted to strike him. When your emotions are heightened, the Kyuubi's power overflows. Very interesting. Lifting Naruto's jacket and shirt, he looked on with amusement, having already completed the necessary hand seals for what he was about to do. Ah, the seal is still visible. Gogya-Fuin, 5-element seal. Not bothering with the heaven scroll in Naruto's equipment pouch, Orochimaru flung him over his shoulder nonchalantly. It was now time to see if Sasuke was as useful as he'd hoped. Nothing changed in Sasuke versus Orochimaru fight. Moving on, Anko leapt through the trees, her mind racing as she tried to track down her wayward sensei. The sun was fading in the distance, which caused her to curse as she quickened her pace. Once the sun had gone down, her main methods of tracking would become useless to her. She stopped on a branch, feeling a bead of sweat running down the side of her face as she stared into the trees. She had been Orochimaru's students, his soldiers, and had learned everything she used now to their full advantage. His betrayal had cut deeply within her, but now she would give her life to kill the man who had made her life a living hell in the village, even if she couldn't take him with her. It's been a long time, Orochimaru-sensei, Anko said, not bothering to turn to face the man she despised so. Impossible. Orochimaru muttered, genuinely surprised that Anko had managed to sense her. He knew that her skill had grown, but hadn't quite expected her to get to this point. Closing her eyes, she leapt into the air, kunai falling into her hand as she prepared to chuck them at her former sensei. Before she could though, she was taken off guard by Orochimaru's tongue, which shot out and wrapped around her wrist. Realigning herself in midair, she landed roughly on another branch. With a loud cry, she gripped the tongue and pulled. You won't get away! Sinai Jashu, hidden shadow snake hands. Snake shot out of her sleeves, latching onto Orochimaru in an attempt to give Anko better gripping power. Flinging Orochimaru overhead, she tried to bring him down as painfully as she could. Years of experience allowed Orochimaru to avoid serious damage as he smirked. Retracting his tongue, he allowed Anko to pull him around. Once he was close enough, he used his chakra to retract his tongue in a way that allowed him a burst of speed into Anko. Caught off guard, Anko was violently smashed into the tree behind her. Not missing a beat, she grabbed Orochimaru's hand in a death grip, unwilling to allow him to escape. Pushing up, she flipped Orochimaru over, pining him down to keep him from escaping. Gripping a kunai in her other hand, she rammed it through both of their hands into the tree. She wasn't about to take any chances. Taking a shaky breath, she grinned at Orochimaru's partly burned fake face. Hey, got you now, I'm just going to borrow your left hand, Orochimaru. She fumbled with his left hand, finally able to form the necessary seal she wanted. Orochimaru's eyes widened, obviously recognizing the seal as well as what it did. Anko smirked in triumph. Yes, you and I will die. Kukuku, planning to commit suicide? Anko whirled around in shock, having been unable to sense the newcomer. Or rather, the real Orochimaru. She cursed as the Orochimaru in front of her dispersed in a plume of smoke. Kagebunshin, shadow clone. Now Anko, a special jonin like yourself shouldn't be using all those nasty kinjutsu I taught you, Orochimaru said smoothly, one hand peeling off the rest of the burn mask from his face. The other formed a half seal, triggering a reaction in Anko. Anko gasped for breath, trying desperately to pick herself up despite the pain from her Ten no Jun, cursed seal of heaven. Why are you here? It's been so long since we've seen each other, Orochimaru said, finally showing his pale face to the world. And yet you're still so cold, Anko. Anko couldn't help but laugh despite the pain. So are you here to assassinate Hokage-sama? No, I don't have enough men to do that yet, he replied, like someone discussing the weather. I thought I'd come and recruit some of the more outstanding genin from this village. In fact, I just gave them one of my seals. There's a kid I want. Anko was now shaking due to the pain that the seal was placing on her body. Had that kid's gonna die. You and I both know, there's only a 1 in 10 chance that he'll survive. Orochimaru finished for her, his expression not changing at all. But like you, he might not die, Anko snickered, knowing that putting so much faith in the seal would cost him. You must really like this kid. Orochimaru smirked as an idea formed in the back of his mind. Jealous, are we? Are you still upset that I threw you away? After all, unlike you, this one has talent. He is of the Uchiha blood after all. So much talent, so much potential. He will be the greatest vessel. I look forward to seeing his growth, so don't stop the exams, especially on my account. Now, for that should interest you. Orochimaru knew what he was about to do would probably come back to bite him, but then that was the danger of snakes. And Anko was a particularly nasty little viper. With a grin only a mad scientist could pull off, he leaned down next to Anko and placed 2 fingers against her curse mark. Anko flinched at the physical contact, wanting nothing more than to bite Orochimaru's fingers or throat. The pain still racked her body though, and she was forced to remain unmoving as Orochimaru channeled chakra into her seal. This is quite the odd little function I found for the seal, Orochimaru said, his smile never wavering. Truth be told, I don't know quite what this will do to you, so we'll have to catch up at some point. You can try again when we meet. Slithering away, Orochimaru slowly began to meld with the tree. Anko looked at him through half-lidded eyes, barely conscious enough to see straight, and was almost unable to hear what he just said. Glaring at him as best as she could, she slowly spoke. You bastard. Orochimaru shrugged. Just remember, don't stop the exams. If you try and stop my enjoyment, know that Konohagakure will be finished. Anko stared into space as he disappeared, finally passing out from the immense pain of the seal beginning the process of rearranging itself. Within the strange anomaly that was Naruto's mindscape, a change was occurring. For in one corner of his mind, there was a special staircase. This staircase would allow Naruto to travel between his mind and his seal, 2 completely different entities, and speak in the sewer area that held his burden, the Kyubi. Now though, a barbed tangle of wire and thick bars were firmly in place between the two, preventing the two from connecting as they previously had. The bars each consisted of a combination of all 5 elements, forming into an impenetrable substance that could only be removed by the counter seal. Within the mindscape, looking through the gate, was the Naruto lookalike. He held his hand a small distance from the entrance, noting the way the chakra prevented him from entering. Slowly he spoke. The gateway is strained. From behind him, there was a giant crash, and a rush of energy followed. Not batting an eye at the occurrence, he turned away from the gate and walked forwards, coming across a large cylindrical room that had the appearance of an oversized dojo. Written on the center of the floor was a group of circles, each one with different words written on them. Leaping down, he began to channel energy through the seal labeled Shodame. First, it is time, he said, his voice barely a whisper as the energy flowed into the shape of a person. Our Lord approaches. Be mindful of the next generation, Senso. Ancestor. As the energy took shape, he walked away, he first duty complete. Within moments, the energy began to settle down, settling on the form of a woman. Her red hair was long, hanging well past her shoulders, to around the middle of her back. She wore a red combat dress that accentuated her quite well. As her violet eyes opened, she slowly began to look around. Where am I? Where's Naruto? What if Naruto unlocks chakra chains and wave? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.